Good afternoon and welcome to the Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, August 22nd. We are having a special meeting, and do we need to convene as the Board of Social Services to do this
No,
meeting?
you just said it.
You just
Okay,
say, we
so
are now.
We're going to convene as the Board of Social Services right now. And we're getting our second quarter update from Sam and staff, Matt and everybody, because Lindsay's not here.
Yep. Just to be clear, don't we usually do a motion and then everybody, do we need
Do
not
I need to make
do
a
that?
motion?
We could just,
Okay, just checking.
we
I'll
don't,
make a motion that we convene as the Board of Social Services. And if we don't need to do that, that's okay.
well, we'll do it anyway. I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye.
right?
Okay.
All right, great. So yeah, I'm Sam Landercasper. Like Francie mentioned, Lindsay Maish, the Director of Human Services, is out on maternity leave. We did get word on Friday that she had a happy, healthy baby boy.
Oh,
so
she had
Hey.
everybody's good. And I am currently serving as the interim director until she's back. We also have Matt McGaw here, who is our Deputy Director of Programs and Services. Stuart Fox, who is our financial analyst. We
I
changed
think,
the term.
yeah, my title is Senior Accounting Analyst.
Don't worry,
we
we'll
go.
change the title
Yeah.
before lunch.
And we have Chad Federowitz, who's our Manager of Senior Services here as well. And yeah, and I'm probably not going to do this introduction very well. I know we do a little run up into why we're here, but the Board of County Commissioners does convene as the Board of Social Services on a quarterly basis to review expenditures for the various programs in the Human Services Department. Human Services is responsible for overseeing various state programs, mandated services. Also, we do contract with a number of other organizations for LEAP, which is Low Income Energy Assistance eligibility. That's with Goodwill. We also contract with Garfield County for child support services, and we contract with Prowers County for the adult protection hotline services that they provide for our child and adult welfare customers. Today, we are going to be reviewing the financial information for the second quarter of fiscal year 2023, so April through June, and I am going to let Stuart Fox take over here to review our budget.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sam.
Before you launch in, I just wanted to say we've got on the program, it says first quarter 2023, just not to throw anybody off. Today, the board will be looking at the first quarter of 2023, but July,
Yeah,
just
it's
wanna make
probably something I just missed in copying over from our last one, yes. So I think most of the rest does show second quarter 2023
yeah,
throughout the
it
document.
does, you're right.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect.
Just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the attention to detail. That's always good. So good afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Stuart Fox. I'm a Senior Accounting Analyst for the Health and Human Services. And this afternoon, I will be presenting on the second quarter financials for Pickens County's Health and Human Services Fund. Second quarter financials for Human Services, they experienced the continuation of many of the trends that I've highlighted in the first quarter. Anytime you can have that continuity in budgets and expenditures, that's generally a good thing. So I think that there's no new startling thing to discuss with you, should be taken as a positive. So some of those trends that continuing from the first quarter include the reduction of caseloads and the adult protection, which resulted in lower than expected expenditures. And just as a note of beta on what I mean by expected, because the end of June is 50% of the year, we would expect expenditures and revenue to be somewhere around 50%. So anything that's lower than 50% kind of catches my eye. So that's what I mean with expected. And additionally, Human Services continue to see below average expenditures in child care due to child care facility staffing issues combined with a decrease in eligible families due to income. I think Matt in the first quarter highlighted some of those issues that we were really having. However, not all trends have continued from the first quarter. It should be noted that the adult protection services in the second quarter had a reversal of its trend regarding below average revenue. Therefore, it had above expected revenue. And this is just due to a timing of state and federal revenue payments. And it should be noted kind of on the bottom that the Human Services Fund did receive in the second quarter our general fund transfer of $945,000 and revenues from property and motor vehicle taxes. So overall, the total programs for the Human Services Fund for the second quarter had actual expenditures exceeding actual revenues, which resulted in a year-to-date deficit of about $174,000. To put things into context, that's about average, not about average, that is similar to last year for the same time period. The aforementioned general fund transfer and property and motor tax vehicles revenue, when those are added into this deficit, essentially erase the deficit and creates a year-to-date surplus of $1.003 million. In addition, if you go through the packet, you'll notice there's an additional, I believe it's, where did we put it? I guess that would be page 5. It talks about the state fiscal year 23 closeout. And so during the second quarter, the Colorado Department of Human Services did their annual state fiscal year closeout process. And that's essentially the state going through and looking at the expenditures and the revenues that they've promised throughout our programs and sort of truing those up. And due to additional funding, federal funding, and an overall trend of underspending statewide in a lot of our programs, the CDHS was able to cover almost all of Pickens County's expenditure overages. So we were made whole. And anecdotally speaking with some of our senior financial staff who've seen this a lot more than I have, this was one of the better state fiscal year closeouts that they've seen. So we've been made whole. So I think with that we can be pretty rest assured that it was a good year for Pickens County, at least from the state level.
Right, because we are typically heavily overspent in a couple of areas like administration. We don't receive nearly the funding that it costs to run the department. So to come out that close to even is great.
Yeah, and traditionally with child welfare, adult protection, they're overspent, and the state is able to make us whole at the end of each year. Something we have to keep an eye on in case we have to plan for the following year in case they are unable to consider the mitigation requests that we do have each year.
We just need a motion.
Could you just describe the TANF, what is an apparent overage, how that accounting is done on TANF?
So you're mentioning there in the TANF Colorado Works, the expenditures being 164%.
Right.
So this is, I'm going to sound like a broken record because it's the same explanation.
It's the same thing, right.
It's essentially we've budgeted in one place and the expenditures are coming somewhere else. We did highlight and make that a noted issue to fix in the 2024 budget process that we've just wrapped up. So this shouldn't be an issue in the 2024
So
budget.
what will be asked is to move the salaries and benefits to the category so it is reflected within the TANF
Correct.
basket,
Yep.
for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's a great succinct way of putting it. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I always have questions about CCAP. If I'm reading correctly in your programmatic update, so any county that was overspent in CCAP got made whole from a different fund, from the ARPA funds at the state. Is that correct?
Well, I think the way that they do that is they look at, so the funds that we aren't spending can be used by others. I think it all kind of reverts back into the fund and then they settle out across. And Stuart, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. Yeah, so really I think for us, when we have an overage, we can sell CCAP dollars to other counties if they're looking to take on our MOE, but I think what we don't use reverts back into their fund and then can be used to even out counties that did overspend.
Okay, I wasn't sure if the state was trying to balance these out by using leftover coronavirus funds, because that's sort of what I read this here.
That's
okay.
what you should read.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a combination of the, kind of, as
Both.
I mentioned, the federal
Okay.
funding and the
Okay.
overall underspending of the entire program statewide. So the program, it wasn't just Pickens County, it was almost every county had underspent their allocation. And so there was additional surplus. And so the state just spread it out and covered any overages that existed.
Do you know if there's any effort to sort of update the income requirements legislatively so that the state isn't sitting on money that families clearly need?
I've not seen anything yet about that. The real change that we had, well, there wasn't much of a change, but we went through the allocation committee to look at how the allocations were determined, and that stayed relatively the same, which for us is great because we've been underspent for a couple years now, 3-4 years after being overspent. So we'd actually managed to increase our allocation, and then we were worried that might start to go down. But for the time being, we're going to stay. We go down just a little bit next year, but we're hoping to try to figure something out to increase utilization of the program before we start to see a decrease in our allocation.
But didn't we used to allow higher income qualifications and we changed that?
No, so the
here?
state actually went in, so we did, and the state came in, and then we actually now are higher than what we were before. So we're at 225% of the federal poverty level. That's mandated by the state for higher income regions, but we still find that that's just still too low. So Kids First really takes the brunt of those families that are over income for CCAP.
Yeah, something we might want to follow up on.
Unsatisfied.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, looking at other issues where those caps haven't been adjusted with the world. You know, and here we're trying to give people sustainable wages, and it's knocking them out of programs that they still need, because it doesn't balance. So maybe that's something when the state we can follow up on with our state representatives and see if there's any opportunity to look at that on a statewide level.
Yeah, that'd be great. The Department of Early Childhood is a new department, and I don't know if they'd be open to those talks, but I think being able to choose our own income limits here would be really helpful to tailor the program to fit our needs.
Right, but we might need to start with getting support statewide and then see how we can spend that. But it's a thought.
All right, thank you.
All right, Stuart, did you have anything else around the expenditures,
I
or?
think that was it. It would be you want to talk about?
What we need to, we'd like to ask the Board of Social Services to make a motion to approve the 2023 second quarter expenditures.
So moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
All right, so next we're going to look at the Economic Assistance Direct Services payrolls. So these are payments made from the Economic Assistance Department, their direct client benefits. And so we'd just like to call out a few areas where we saw some changes. First is the Low Income Energy Assistance Program. What we noticed when we looked into that from 2021 and 22 to 23 is that the decrease in expenditures was actually not due to a decrease in enrolled members, but due to smaller benefit amounts going out to those folks. So what we're seeing with the LEAP program, which I should have probably said helps pay for heating and cooling costs as well as water costs for homeowners and renters, what we're seeing is that they're being issued a smaller benefit amount, which is related to people having higher income. Which, I just saw the unemployment numbers dovetails with our 2.8% unemployment this month. So that's something that we're working to get the word out to more people. While the issuance might be lower, we want to see utilization be higher. We have plans to do some outreach events in September. There's some funding from the LEAP program to help us reach out to folks. So we're going to try to have some events here in Aspen, Basalt, and Redstone, and just try to get folks more information, explain the program. We think a lot of folks probably aren't aware that this can help pay for their water expenses. So folks on wells, that can be really helpful. So we're trying to see if we can bump up the enrollment in that program this year. Colorado Works, you'll notice the issuance is at 0 right now. That is really the issuance that you see in this table here is what's called basic cash assistance. And that part of the program has a very, very low income limit, so that folks who are enrolling in the program have to essentially make less than $500 or $600 a month. There are different income limits, a higher level of income limits, but that's where we contract with different providers to help provide services. Like we're contracting with Aspen Youth Center to provide extra summer slots during the summer to get more kids in who are lower income. So a lot of the issuance we see for the Colorado Works program doesn't show up in these direct client benefits. It shows up as contracts that we have with different providers to provide services. And then finally, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP or Food Assistance. You do see a slight decrease there, and I know we have talked in the past about the discontinuance of the emergency benefits and how that's going to impact our population. We're going to start seeing that in this next quarter. That slight issuance decrease is because those did end in, I believe it was May. So in the next quarter, I think we'll probably see those issuances reverting more towards what we probably were seeing in 2019. But that is already having a big impact on the workload of our food providers as well as our economic assistance staff, who are getting a lot of questions about this because we've had folks who've been used to getting the max allotment for 3 years now who all of a sudden saw this big decrease. So fortunately, we've seen increase in utilization with Lift Up and with our pantries and things, so people are getting directed to the right places, but it is a pretty significant change.
We did set up a food card assistance program for those impacted by the reduction in benefits. And that was from some of the public health emergency funds that were left over. So we use those funds in a few creative ways to kind of offset some of these changes, to let people get a little bit more of a runway and adjustment to that reduction.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about any of those payrolls? All right. If not, we'd like to ask the Board of Social Services to make a motion to approve the 2023 second quarter payrolls.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Great.
Aye.
All right, and then with our new format that we talked about last time for these memos, we are just going to go over some programmatic updates for the Human Services Department, and then we also have some information about contracts and MOUs that have been signed for Human Services. And I will let Matt take on the economic assistance update.
All right, so as mentioned, our economic assistance staff have been impacted by an increase of workload with the ending of the pandemic, and a lot of people with questions having to have their eligibility redetermined. And so with that, we did use additional public health emergency money to look at hiring an EA temporary support staff member. And so we're in the process right now of hiring that position. It will be a short-term, less than 6 months or less, and it'll meet the threshold of about 25 hours a week. So that's something to really provide some support for our staff. It'll help with our customers who come to our building to get more timely service. And so this is something right now that we've budgeted for, and hopefully we'll have on staff soon. We're in the process of setting up our interviews. I think we had about 5 final applicants. So don't know if there's any other questions about that, but that is one of the big program updates right now that we're working on for EA.
Question just about the applicant pool. Are they from somewhere nearby, I hope?
Yeah, fortunately, we did find applicants that were within Pitkin County and some that maybe just right down the valley here. So we do think that's a good sign, as it is, as you know, it is hard to hire sometimes for those short-term temporary positions.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And then we do have if there's no other questions for the economic assistance update, Chad, would you like to? Okay, Chad would like us to do that. So we're currently in the.
I do have one
Yeah.
question. The ending of the public health emergency, which the pandemic is still going on, there's probably still some work load on your staff related to that, actually. And is that what's happening? Is we didn't have the extra staff that we had on for the public health emergency, but there's still work involving COVID. Therefore, you're shorthanded, and that's why you're looking for a half of a year of an extra person. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I think that there is also a need to assess on whether or not that's needed longer term. It's hard to gauge sometimes the workloads of our economic assistance staff because they're working in so many different programs at different points in someone's application process. And so to really quantify that has been complicated. And so I think we do want to assess that. And statewide, they've been doing workload studies in all of these different areas. So we're hopeful to get informed from the state what an appropriate our workforce should look like, as far as number of FTEs goes. And so I think with this, it's definitely to address that temporary need, but also I do think it's important that we look long-term here, and is there a benefit to try to find a way to continue on with a support staff member like that?
Okay.
Yeah, and these funds were particularly hard to utilize because they initially authorized these funds very early on in the pandemic when they thought it would be ending after a year, after 2 years. And so a lot of the workload with the Medicaid, which is where this funding is coming from, didn't even take place until the actual end of the public health emergency. So we've kind of been in a holding pattern to decide when and how to use these funds until we actually got to the end, because a lot of the work comes from when the public health emergency ends. Everyone on Medicaid has to be redetermined, meaning their case has to be looked at again, their income checked to see if they still qualify. And our caseload increased substantially during COVID. So that's where a lot of that work's coming in now. It's just been kind of hard to say when we should actually hire somebody because we didn't know until it was pretty much the month before that it was actually ending. Yeah, and then the workload shot up. So.
Any other questions regarding our economic assistance temporary staff member or any of the other programs?
You're going to come back to us at some point regarding that? We're not voting on the staff member. This is a work session, of course. We couldn't do it today, but I'm just wondering when we're going to see it again and we'll have a better understanding.
Sure.
Yeah, that would come forward in a budget supplemental to approve. And it'd be an adjustment to the table of organization at that time.
Thanks.
Okay. So I think we can move to our senior services update. We've had the ongoing remodel project happening. Unfortunately, there's been a few delays in that. I think there might have been a work permit issue, and then there was an issue around some of the materials that were being ordered. Senior Services continues to be housed at our Human Services building, where we are serving lunches and still providing programming across the community. So it does look like mid-November is now the target date. And so we would be hopeful to be in there and ready to go by then. But right now it's all depending on the work that's being done and the materials being here on time. So that would be ongoing. And then our head chef did retire this last quarter, and so we've been in the process of recruiting and looking to hire a new head chef. This position has been advertised, and this is one that we are already in the process of. We have a few good candidates that we are setting up interviews for. And so I don't know, Chad, is there a timeline on when we're expecting to have that person on board, or Begley?
There's some flexibility.
It happens to be a good time right now to be hiring for this position because since we are having the remodel project, we're doing a lot of the catering for the meals right now. So it gives us a little bit of time and room to really make sure we find a good fit for this position. And so that's something that we're hoping to have board here in the next quarter. And we'll certainly provide that update once we have our new person. Any questions about the senior services?
Yeah, would someone please be so kind as to give us a heads up as to when you're going to do your grand opening of the senior center? Because I think the board would like to be part of that.
Absolutely. We appreciate your interest in that. And absolutely, we'll be communicating that. We'll be providing some outreach. Obviously, our senior newsletter is a big one, but we definitely countywide, and we'll make
be
sure
great.
to extend an invite to you all.
And we'll let the county manager know that if that interferes with the budget meeting, we'll go to the senior center. That'll be our priority.
I wanted to add to that I just discovered a couple weeks ago, there's a band of seniors who just play the best rock and roll. And these guys are so good that I was floored. And I don't think a single one of them is under maybe 68 or 70. So they'd be the perfect band for this big soiree you're planning.
It's not Steve Cole in that group, is it?
It's not, but he'd fit right in.
He'd fit right in.
Noted. We'll have Chad plan for.
And they're locals. They're all locals, like veterinarians and doctors and lawyers and
That'd be
firemen.
fun. That would be really fun.
Right.
That sounds good. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
A
I'm
grand
thinking,
opening, a grand reopening. That's something we should plan for.
Grand old
Bunch
real.
of old guys, Woody Nelson, Willie Nelson, and who else could we get?
Keith
You're
Richards.
talking really
If you can
old.
get Willie Nelson, we'll accept that. And
Mick
plan the
Jagger.
party.
Mick Jagger, we could get all the headliners, the old.
Dolly.
I need a budget supplemental for that show.
Make it happen. ZZ Top's in the neighborhood.
Well, that'll be a public health emergency fund.
After the party, there would be.
Yeah. That's a cardiac rehab fund.
John's not even smiling. He's thinking. Oh. He's already working on making it happen. I
He's
get it.
Googling the band. What's the name of the band?
I can't remember their name. I'll think of the name.
That would be fun. That would be really fun.
We appreciate the suggestions. Any other thoughts, questions, or ideas here on our
Are you
updates?
going for kegs or like just in the
Haven't decided yet. Yes and yes.
Those prune juice kegs.
All right, so I think our next update, I'm going to pass to Sam to kind of go through.
Great. Yep. So as part of the new format, we just wanted to make sure that each year we got in front of y'all with the contracts and MOUs and IGAs that we've signed that you've all seen for the most part, have come across your desks already. We just wanted to have a bit of a summary on here with the contracted amounts, the dates of the agreements that we signed, and just see if there were any questions. I think there's only two on here that are still in process. One is the Adult and Family Services Core Services Plan, which is just waiting for a signature, I believe, from a few folks. The state's approved it already. And then also we have the CDHS work number contract, which I think you're having a second reading on that with Matt tomorrow. But other than that, all of the rest of these have been approved and come across your desks. We just wanted to kind of put that together and have a review since it's really kind of the end of our contract season right now. We don't have any major ones coming up towards the end of the year. So we can go through each of these, or if folks just have questions about any specific ones, we just wanted to give you the opportunity to see them all in one place.
Are there any questions?
I do have a question.
Okay.
On the pretrial services contract, which I think is a great benefit, I mean, we've seen a lot of good use with that. Where does that money come from? The 130,000, 125,000?
That's a good question. I don't know where those funds come from.
I want to make sure we have sustainable
It's
funding.
the Healthy Community
I
Fund?
think it's the Healthy Community
Stuart
I
got us
think
there.
so.
Perfect.
Okay, so that would be part of the Healthy Community Fund renewal grants, because that's really a beneficial program.
It's
So I'll
one of the
keep an eye-
major initiatives that gets funded each year.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Could I ask about the Trans Mountain Media contract, $50,000? What is that?
So Trans Mountain Media, we, in past years, prior to the pandemic, Human Services had tried to run their own outreach and communication strategy, not super effectively. So during the pandemic, we started working with Trans Mountain Media to really put those messages out, make sure that they were effective, work with social media. This is actually the last year that we're contracting with them, so this is just kind of finishing out that cycle, at which point we're going to be working more with Marcy's team, and we do now have a program analyst in Human Services who's taking on some of that social media and newsletter work. So this is really just the end of that big
Got
COVID
it. Okay, thank you.
outreach.
Yeah, you answered all the questions I was going to ask. Thank you.
I've heard more of the ads on local radio,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is huge because of the commuters and people who are in tune to that. And it always catches my attention, and so I think that's been great.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed working with them. They've made it a lot easier on us because it's not our expertise, right, to get these things lined up and scheduled and everything. So it's been really helpful, and we've heard good feedback that folks are getting the information.
Like hearing them. Thanks.
Yeah.
What are the Aaliyah and Blackbout contracts?
All right, Matt, I'll let you take Aaliyah.
Yeah, I can speak on the Aaliyah contract. Right now, that's a contract that really has to do with some training and professional development for staff. Mainly some leadership coaching that's happening right now. Really one thing that we noticed with our reorganization and change is how we all can step into our new leadership roles, work together, help provide that clarification and role clarification for our staff. It's one thing that I think we felt was important as we went through the transition, and it is something that we have worked and contracted with Aaliyah in the past, and they do a lot of workforce well-being work. They do a lot of leadership coaching, and it's all directed for human service agencies. So they're very familiar with some of the barriers and struggles that our staff will experience in some of the work that we have. So that's what that one's for.
This is tangential, but I have been suggesting to our APSHA director that perhaps some training for the staff there related to, I think, just like sensitivities of case management, because, APSHA's in sort of a interesting profile where it's a bit of a human services organization and a regulatory body. And, I just want to make sure that they are trained to sort of do case management in a way that I think, behooves the community and reflects that sort of human service role. So maybe offline we can talk about if you think this organization or if you had other suggestions for who might provide training like that, I could forward along to APSHA.
Yeah, I think that's great, and if there's an opportunity even just to talk with somebody, and we can talk offline on that, but I would be happy to help with that if you think it would be helpful.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question along those lines, just regarding, it's a naive question, but I would assume our HR department would be involved in that somehow, in those activities, and is that something that's beyond the scope of HR to provide, peer learning? And you kind of think that would be an in-house. For me, I would just assume that's an in-house thing. But maybe it's less expensive to hire a contractor. I just wonder how that nexus works.
Yeah, Greg, we don't necessarily provide all of those types of trainings, particularly case management types of trainings. Internally, we'll bring in outside expertise to inform and provide the trainings. In the case where there's department-specific training needs, oftentimes each department has training budgets and such that they're able to access. We do provide organization-wide training too that HR leads, but for example, this is pretty specific to human
Specialized
services.
for HR,
Yeah,
yeah.
we wouldn't provide it, for example, at the airport necessarily. Kelly's right that APSHA definitely gets into those roles. Sometimes the enforcement actions I think are actually almost case management kind of action. So it's kind of a specialized place where case management comes in again.
Got it. So that's the standard, is to have a contractor for that specialty.
Yeah, and like I said, each department, sometimes they're sending folks for training, sometimes where it's multiple staff, we're bringing folks in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we've had to really strategize around some of our training needs and plans. We do get different allocations to help support some of our workforce well-being and staff training. So we do think that this is one that we've had success with in the past and look forward to working with them again.
And we actually did just receive word from Healthcare Policy and Finance, which is Medicaid, that we are getting some grant funds to help match some of these funds. So not 100% sure on the amount yet, but it'll help with this as well.
Okay, great.
And then just the Blackbout
Yep. So Blackbaud is the software platform that accepts applications for the Healthy Community Fund. So it manages that, manages the outcomes and things like that. So that's our annual contract there with them. Mm-hmm.
I will just note that Garfield County, who provides our child support services, did win a few statewide awards for Pitkin County. To be exact on what they were, I'm sorry, I can email them to you. I don't remember. But I did give a shout out to the staff over there. They've done a great job, and they've been a great partner when it comes to that work, especially with our capacity to do that. It's just a really nice thing, so I wanted to point that out.
It's Garfield has done a great job.
Yes, they have.
That's good to know. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions on any of the contracts?
No, that's good information, though, thank you.
Great.
My
All right.
only question would be, how do you keep track of all of these?
We're learning.
Yes, it's
You must
yeah.
have a good calendar reminder kind of a thing when you need to be doing what on the different contracts.
Right, all the paperwork that comes with them.
Yeah, we're working on figuring that out, but we do have a good spreadsheet. We're adding things to it. But it's nice to come review this with you all because it helps us kind of remember where we're at as well. So
Well, down in the downstairs meeting room, the election staff has a whole whiteboard with a calendar of the whole year and all of the different things they have to do at different times of the year that are like required things that they have to do. It's pretty amazing when you see, and this must be a similar kind of process to make
bet.
sure keep up, you don't let anything slip through the cracks.
yeah, or forget about it until it's due and then have to come running to y'all with an emergency resolution. We try to avoid that as
Sometimes
much as
that happens,
possible.
yeah.
Then you just have to remember to look at the whiteboard on a regular basis.
If I could ask just regarding the recommended action, it says approve first quarter 2023 human service expenditures and payrolls in my packet. And
Oh, it says
are we
first
back-
again?
We
All
already
right.
We're back to second again.
We already did both
Yep,
of
need to
those.
put that back to second.
Did we?
Oh, yeah, it says
is
it
this the
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct there.
That was
Did we
just-
already do that?
Yep, we already did that.
Wow.
I
we're
would
ahead of
I
me.
would also mention that in your packets, the child care issuance number was not correct, as well as the total for year-to-date 2023. I got that updated, so it's correct on the
Slide, but
the
not in
slide that we
paperwork,
showed,
'cause
but
That
not
was a
in
big difference.
yeah, yep. So just wanted to clarify that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. If there's
That's very
nothing else,
helpful.
then we'll get out of your hair.
Do
Then we need a motion to adjourn the
yes,
meeting,
I'm
so
so
I'll move to
moved.
adjourn.
So moved that we adjourn.
I think
Second.
it's been moved and seconded, and all those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you.
Good job,
you.
Sam.
And I promised her she'd have her baby on my birthday, which was the 31st, so I'm in big trouble because she went a little over what.
Yeah, I know that towards the end there, she was really.
She was ready.
Let's go. Yeah.
I know.
She actually went over.
I know she did. Oh, my God. Yeah, maybe she'll forget when she comes back that I told her that wasn't gonna happen.
So my mom and dad were driving around when I was supposed to be born, and they broke an axle in Denver, like going through the little drain things across the streets, all the dips,
Oh, no.
and they broke an axle in the car trying to induce labor in my mom so
Wow.
I would be born.
Did it work?
Yeah,
I
plus
guess it
your
worked
mom-
eventually.
I don't
think
know.
your
They
mom went into labor and couldn't get to the hospital because they had a broken axle.
I had a friend who just had her baby in the car.
She did?
On the way
Where?
to on the way to Aspen Valley,
Oh,
From where?
up Maroon Creek.
Oh, well,
Not very
even that
far.
far. That's cutting it close.
In the car.
Thank
Open discussion.
you.
Okay, now we're going to have a request presented by Ashley Pearl for the Stotts Mill Child Care Program. Hi, Ashley, welcome.
Share the thing. Ta-da.
no. Ta-da, we're here.
Hi. everyone. It's lovely to see you all in person. I'm Ashley Pearl. I'm the Community Resiliency Manager for Picken County. And I'm joined today by Michelle Tebow, who's the Planning Director for Town of Basalt. And we're here to talk about the Stotts Mill Child Care Center. Well, the Stotts Mill, what we hope will be Child Care Center. Stotts Mill is a parcel in Basalt over on the south side that the town of Basalt has been heavily involved in building out and supporting. And there's a part of that that can become a child care in the near future. So Michelle's going to talk quite a bit about those details, but our purpose here is to give you background about the site and then identify how best Picken County wants to be involved. So at the end, I have 3 questions for you. One of them is around if you're interested in being a supporting partner to the town of Basalt's upcoming grant application. The other is, are you interested in being more than a supporting partner, potentially giving match dollars towards the project? And then the third is, what other questions are you going to have? If the grant's awarded and if we're going to continue in a partnership with this, what would a deeper dive into this look like? And I do just want to say this grant application kind of, the timeline has been fairly quick. So I would have loved to get ahead of you or get in front of you a couple months ago, give you some background about the project. So forgive me if today is a little bit, it's 2 in 1, right? It's the background and it's the request from Town of Basalt to be a partner. I would have loved to do that a little bit slower, but that's the nature of grant applications. So these are the questions we'll talk about at the end, but I'll turn it over to Michelle to walk you through Stotts Mill, the PUD, Child Care Center, and kind of all the background details. And yeah, are we good on Michelle?
We're good, I think.
Okay, great.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Tebow, Planning Director with the Town of Basalt. I am so sorry I'm not there in person today, but I'm not feeling good, and I didn't want to share my germs with anybody, so I feel a little odd making this request via Zoom, but it's important, so I'm here. Some of you may recognize my name from projects in my affordable housing days with the City of Aspen, Burlingame Phase 1, Trescott Phase 2, 7th and Main, whatnot. But at any rate, I'm grateful to be here to talk to you about Stotts Mill. The property is located in the south side neighborhood of Basalt, across the Rio Grande Trail and across from the Basalt High School. The Stotts Mill PUD, for all intensive purposes, acts like an affordable housing neighborhood where employers such as the Aspen School District, Aspen Country Day, and others have purchased lots to develop housing for staff retention. Let's see here. The only existing daycare in Southside recently changed from a commercial center to a home daycare, reducing spots at Hobby Farm by nearly 50%. So this is a big item for us. And then we'll go to the next slide. The background on Stotts Mill is that it has been a long-going land use application since 2009. After several revisions and updates, it was finally annexed into the town in 2017. The town of Basalt exacted a public benefiting space as a condition of the PUD approvals for a 4,000 square foot daycare space plus outdoor area. The value of those exactions is nearly $2.4 million. The lot itself is worth at least $250,000. The architecture to construct the building valued at $175,000, and the building core and shell for the building permit value is over $2 million. So we'll give you a quick walkthrough here of the building. The ground level is, it's called leasable space on this slide, and that is the daycare space, 4,000 square feet here. So the stars are to kind of orient you on which direction you're looking at. It is a very well lit and designed building by BOCC Architecture. Go to the next slide. And here is another elevation from the west, and that's the entrance there, a little portico on the first floor. And we'll talk later down the slides about what's happening on the second floor, but just a very modern and new building. This is a glance at the play area in the back of the building, fenced in and whatnot. Lots of windows. So let's see here. Really, what I wanted to share with you as well about these renderings is that they don't capture the true beauty of this location. The location is across the way from the Basalt High School and the bluff behind Basalt High School. So it really looks out into beautiful open area and this excellent connection to the outdoors that are in, and the feel of nature that our valley is so passionate about. What is not included in our ask, but I'm just want you to be aware, is the second floor of this building. And on this second floor, there are 2 affordable housing units, both of which are deed restricted. One unit is deed restricted for the for employees of the Roaring Fork School District, and the other unit is restricted for the property manager of the entire PUD. But those are separate from this request, but that's what's happening on the second floor, in case you were wondering. Stotts Mill, we are looking for, what is part of our request today is to know that we need to finish the interior of the building. The developer has provided the core and the shell of the space, and now the future daycare provider is tasked with finishing the interior space. So what this means is that we have all of the things in a core and shell to finish out: fire suppression system, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, insulation, ceiling separation, drywall, and of course all the finishings, fixtures, and equipment. This is different than a white box. A white box would be if you were moving into a commercial space that was basically finished with all of your lighting fixtures and your drywall, and you just wanted to put in your own store fixtures. This is really just the exterior walls of the building. So everything on the inside has to go in, and that has been a big challenge for us to secure a daycare provider in this space. One of the reasons that the space was turned over as a core and shell and not a white box was to allow for different floor plans by a future provider to best meet their needs. So the town of Basalt has been working with Blue Lake Preschool, who has created a floor plan, and we've gone out to three different contractors for estimates, and these are general estimates that are really kind of an order of magnitude. You see that they range from 1.197 up to 1.8 million. And the variety there is that we had a contractor who assumed we would do some slow phasing. We would do some basic finishes to get 2 classrooms up and running and wait to do future finishes. We had another contractor that just gave us the full shebang with all of the ideal playground equipment and finishes. So we're assuming that we'll be at somewhere in the middle of that range, because again, these are general estimates and not detailed fees. So for 2 years, the town of Basalt has been soliciting providers for the daycare space, and just had so many hurdles that we were finally able to find out why providers weren't going in there, besides the fact that it's very expensive to finish out the space. And one of which was the lease agreement with the developer was based on a kind of a standard commercial agreement, lease agreement. And those terms aren't very forgiving or friendly for daycare providers. So the town of Basalt has negotiated to be the main leaseholder, and that way we can work directly with the preschool operator to create a lease term that really works for the preschool or daycare provider. Additionally, having Basalt be the main leaseholder obviously opens up this greater opportunity for funding, including this employer-based grant, which will be really meaningful to achieve almost 75% of the potential funding for the space.
What is an
Oh, and I
employer,
should tell
what
you-
is an employer-based grant?
We are going to chat about that. Like, that's the
Okay.
bulk of our conversation here today. Yeah. Michelle, do you want to share a little bit about what Blue Lake envisions putting in there as far as spaces and who they'll serve?
Yeah, so right now we have a floor plan that includes 2 classrooms and a flex space. And as we're going forward, we're looking at modifying that floor plan into 4 classrooms. But what we know right now is that if the space were to open in the fall of 2024, Blue Lake would be able to hit the ground running with 2 classrooms for the universal preschool program, and offering up to 40 new spaces there, 40 full-time year-round spaces. There is an idea if there needed to be some part-time spaces mixed into that. With full-time spaces, there could be the potential for 90 new spaces in just those first 2 classrooms. We're talking about the capacity and the build out for the second 2 classrooms, because this is a 4,000 square foot space. And those other 2 classrooms would be for infants and toddlers, which we know there's a high demand for. But it would be helpful for Blue Lake to have a little time to ramp up on staffing, to have teachers for the infant and toddler rooms.
So you're talking about having 20 or more kids in one of those rooms?
In the 2 daycare spaces, I think that they have a morning session from 7:30 to 3:30, and then there's an after school session for the slightly bigger kids that she runs at the Blue Lake existing facility right now. And so these are Michelle's numbers, the Michelle from Blue Lake's numbers that run there. But yes.
Wow.
I think there's state governing on those numbers that would restrict those numbers.
This is based on, so yeah, Michelle Oger currently runs Blue Lake and Little Blue preschools, and as the selected applicant by the town of Basalt, she put forward a model that she's running right now in her Blue Lake school that has been fairly successful and has met a pretty wide array of needs. So she's suggesting having this be a similar model. So that's where she gets those numbers from.
So could I ask a question? The staffing ramping up, we were led to believe staffing was in place with Blue Lake taking this. Because our concern was building another facility without having staff to staff it. And I think that we were led to believe that she had staffing lined up. Now I'm hearing she needs time to ramp up staffing. So that's a concern I have about our continuing to build spaces when we have spaces available elsewhere that we can't staff.
Yeah, I think that I could be misrepresenting that. I know for sure she has staff for the 2 classrooms. Because this has been such a quick turnover, we've in applying for this grant application, the concept of having the infant and toddler rooms, we've just been talking through that, frankly, in the last 2 weeks. And so building out the plan for that is still in progress. But I think the potential is certainly there. And fall 2024 it's clearly a year away. So I don't think she can say for sure that she has the staff today for those infant rooms. But her plan was to offer to have the infant and toddler rooms at some point.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Michelle, you want me to take this one? Give your
That'd be
voice a
great.
break. So as part of Michelle and I's, just kind of, I spend some space in the child care landscape so that Picken County is up to date on the latest and greatest. I became aware of this employer-based childcare grant, and I brought it to Michelle's attention. So it's a grant from the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, which is the new department, and it provides up to $800,000 towards new construction of a childcare center. And the kind of caveat to it is an employer, so a hospital, a school, a local government, whoever you are as an employer, applies for the funds, uses the funds to build out the center, and then uses that center to receive childcare spots in return for their employees. So that's what we mean by employer-based childcare. So a couple other things about the grant is there's a 25% match, which if we say our kind of cost of the project is 1.2 million, then the 25% match is 300,000. And the grant is due August 30th, which naturally is just coming right up. So I brought this to Michelle's attention. I said, hey, I don't know if you know that this is out there. It's frankly one of the only grants that's available right now to build out new childcare centers. So when those numbers came in of 1.2 and upwards to build out this center, Blue Lake's certainly not going to be able to bring that kind of money to the table, nor is Town of Basalt, nor really anyone. So it's definitely going to take a partnership. So the Town of Basalt has considered or is planning on applying for these funds as the Town of Basalt, which is the employer, and thus would get some priority spots for their employees. The Town of Basalt has 36 employees, so they probably don't have a huge childcare need. So that's one of the reasons they've reached out to Picken County to say, would you want to be a supporting partner on this grant and potentially receive priority spots for our employees in return? There's a lot of details that would need to be worked out there, but the thought being some priority spots to the employers and then the rest of those spots go to the community, because ultimately we need more spots in the community and we want to make sure that that's, I mean, I've heard you all say that's a big priority of yours. The employer-based grant, I think if we were left to our devices, it would be great to just get this money for all community use, but this is one of the only grants that's out there right now for new construction. And it has this kind of stipulation that the employer must apply for the funds on behalf of the child care operator. So that's the grant that we wanted to chat with you all about today. The Town of Basalt, Michelle came to me and John and Kara and said, would you be willing to support us? Two kind of requests there. One was, will you sign on to the grant application as a supporting partner? So a letter of support to the grant application. And then the second one being, does Picken County have any interest in contributing funds towards the required match? I think lots of folks are aware that you all have been spending some of your ARPA dollars to support childcare regionally. And in addition to that, we have 370-ish employees. So by being a supporting partner and a matching partner, our employee base makes for a really strong employer-based childcare application, especially, as opposed to just Town of Basalt by themselves. Saying we're building out a whole center for our 36 employees. If they combine with Picken County, it's a much stronger application. So they came to all of us and we kind of made a quick assessment. We said, well, Picken County has been clear that we want to support regional childcare. You all have given ARPA money towards the staff stipend program and the maintenance and equipment program. We also don't have any sort of benefit like this. We do give some childcare monies to our employees in certain circumstances, but we don't have any agreements or any kind of access for our employees right now to childcare. That's certainly a benefit that could come from this, and is something we hear from employees. Everyone is struggling to get on wait lists and find spots, and I know from personal experience, childcare is a real hard thing when you're trying to work full time. So it would certainly be something as an employer that would benefit us. And then lastly, this certainly qualifies for how you all choose to spend ARPA funds. So a couple considerations, and then we can have discussion. As far as your ARPA funds go, we have 1.9 million remaining in unencumbered or unassigned ARPA funding. So you could certainly pull out of that and still have some left to do other things with. John has also suggested that we could use general fund dollars so that we're recognizing, part of it is from ARPA, recognizing the community benefit. We could pull some money from the general fund to recognize the direct benefit to county employees if you all wanted to. And then we're trying to meet a grant application deadline. We're certainly not, we're not quite there with all the details, the agreements, the timeline, all of that. So recognizing there would certainly need to be quite a bit more conversation around what do we mean by priority spots? What do we mean as, like, are we a supporting partner, and what does that look like? And all of that to come. I think this opportunity to get up to $800,000 towards this is something we can't let pass us by, because there's not, like I said, not a lot else out there to fund then this order of magnitude of build out. So that's why I wanted to bring it in front of you before the grant application. So
Patty has a question.
Yeah, I have
go
a
for it.
lot of questions. Do you want to finish and then?
Yeah, so that was kind of, this is my last slide. So the question we have is, would you like to sign on as a supporting partner? So just a letter of support to the grant application. Thoughts around being a matching funding partner, and if so, where we would want to pull those funds. And then if the grant would be awarded to Town of Basalt, what other questions, what other things would you like to spend some more time discussing if we were to hear about that? And we wouldn't hear about the grant till mid to late October. So put in the application, and then Town of Basalt would let us know if they receive it, and we could have some more conversations this winter. So those are kind of the three questions we wanted to bring it forward to you as, an irrelevant immediate opportunity, as you've been interested in, supporting childcare across the community.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Patty?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem signing on with a letter of support for this grant. I mean, it makes sense, but I'm concerned about the employer grant part of it. Do they allow you, Basalt, to be the employer but not getting the benefit? Can they then say, well, we're the employer, but we don't need these spaces, so we're going to give them to Picking? I mean, that's a question I have. Does the grant allow for that? I do not want to see Picking County managing construction of a project for childcare. I will not. We don't have staff. We don't have we're already stretched too thin. I cannot allow that to happen. I think having this as a benefit to our staff who need childcare is a great thought, and us getting some priority spots would be terrific. I looked at John on using another portion of our general fund. I'd like to see the money coming from, I just am concerned we keep nitpicking away at our general fund for issues, and I think we might need to be a little more creative in where we find funding opportunities for this. So I think the time frame, it's a week away, is short, but I don't think that we can not at least help Basalt submit a grant application for this. That would be foolish, I think, on our part when we do want to support childcare. I'm just concerned about how we might fund our portion and how flexible this employer grant can be if Basalt's the employer, but we're getting the benefit.
Yeah, let me speak to that one piece. So we're working with our grant consultant, Sustainable Strategies, to kind of assess our viability for this grant, and they've said it's a very strong grant application, with Town of Basalt being they would get the money, they would manage the construction project. We're not doing that.
Thank you.
And then as if we're signing on as a supporting agency with matching funds, the state would see us kind of as together, Basalt and Picken.
So is that clear in the grant application?
Yeah,
Okay.
and they seem to think it would be fine.
Yeah.
So I think those two pieces would be kind of a non-issue moving forward, and we've definitely thought about
Yeah, we need to be really
keep it
clear on
at
that.
arm's length and just be really clear on
Yeah.
those
And then
details.
as far as the funding issue, I just, even though it's only 100,000, I still have concerns about us keep utilizing that, and maybe there's some other opportunities we can look at in the interim.
Yeah, and I'll address my thinking on that anyway, is because there is a benefit that may accrue to our own employees ahead of the community. It was really keeping with the intent of the ARPA funds versus having some portion that is an employee benefit, which I think is more appropriately drawn from local funds. You are right, Patty. It's off cycle, and it would reduce the fund balance that would be available. We're probably gonna have some other off cycle kind of requests. We are doing better in sales tax and such, so we are gonna perform better than the budget that this board adopted in terms of fund balance that will be available. In this case, this was an opportunity that really came up because the grant is available. We had a little bit of a short fuse. I know I got the call somewhere between Baltimore and New York, I think, on this one to talk about it.
The only one call?
And, yeah. But what's really great about it is we have a shovel-ready project. We have
Kind of.
a shovel-ready-ish project, right? And we have a partner that we've executed a lot of partnerships with and have good trust and track record with in Basalt. And so that seemed like a win, and it is taking on some risk that you've pointed out, Patty, but I think for a benefit in an area that we're a relatively new player, and it's an opportunity for us to dip in with funding and potentially have a big long-term impact on availability in the future.
Well, I just think, looking at 100,000 coming out of general fund, maybe we can, in the interim, look at some other opportunities for funding. And I'm hoping at our budget retreat that I'm so excited about, that we can look at this prioritization of how we're using our general fund monies, because we keep dipping.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks,
So
Francie.
I would say it sounds like the bum's rush in one part where it's like we're in the big hurry and we need the money now and you got to do this. So it makes me nervous, but I'll take the bait and say, yes, let's do this. Let's apply for this. But what are our options if after everything settles down and we decide this doesn't work for us? Do we have an out? Do we have, I don't expect that to happen, but I'm just thinking, say they say, yeah, oh, by the way, there's some criteria here that just is unpalatable to you. Like, what commitment are we making? They're not committing to us until they guarantee the grant funding. So what's our commitment up until this thing goes hard in October or whenever? Just wondering what that would be.
I think that as the town of Basalt is the lead agency, so they're taking on that commitment. I think we could also look at it just like you all gave some money to Response for their new shelter a couple months ago. We could look at it as it's a grant to support community build out. The employer thing I know is like it's taken me a little while to get there. To me, and reading through the grant and working with our grant consultants, it seems relatively low risk for Picken County. And at the end of the day, if they award us the money and it's a small amount, it's way less than 800,000, and we're going to have to jump through a ton of hoops, those are conversations we can certainly
We can have then. Got
Yeah.
it.
The bigger uncertainty then is our relationship with Basalt, who we're handing the money to as part of this, and that would be subject, we'd probably have to execute an intergovernmental agreement around the funds and the long-term benefits. But from staff's perspective, that's where our track record and being able to work with Basalt and being in existing partnerships. It is a leap of trust, but I think a well-considered leap of trust
They're a
on that
trusted
front.
partner.
Yeah.
If I could, my follow-up question was regarding the building itself. It's so close to the Habitat for Humanity Basalt Vista project that I'm hoping, and also because we have an enlightened local architect who's done this, I'm hoping that this project is energy efficient and reaching for net zero, and it doesn't
already
have a
built.
gas hookup, and they're going for electrification, and they've got to check all those boxes, because I don't want to participate in a building that isn't going in that direction.
I had a similar question.
Yeah, it's built though. The show is
So
built.
what's the deal? What's the energy?
It'd be nice to know
Protocols.
what we're, investing in.
Sure, I can speak to that. The core is built, but the HVAC and the heating systems are to be are next in line. And as you may know, Basalt recently adopted updated sustainable building regulations and the 2021 IECC. So we want to do all of the things that you're talking about. And in fact, our code requires it at this point in time. So a high electric and clean energy will be a large part of it. And that is part of the big number, frankly, in the build out of this space is putting in the heating.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. We can learn more.
I have a question about how is it determined which Pitkin County employees would be able to be in these units should we proceed with this?
We have not
Have
figured
children.
that out.
Oh, it's raining?
It's pouring.
Sorry.
I think the
And I don't have to
hurricane
water my yard when I get
arrived.
home.
The hurricane
Sorry.
has arrived. Yeah,
Or my
so
front yard,
Francie,
my front window
that
is
that is
open.
not a benefit we currently offer, and it's not one that we've developed before this request has come forward. Typically, what we've done, for example, like with the housing programs and such, is either on a first come, first served basis, or then a lottery after that if we're oversubscribed. And the same, we'd probably have some similar
First come,
process
first
here.
serve?
Yeah, for example, for our housing joint equity program, that's really as we have funds and people are available. We'd have to see what the demand was versus the
We don't know how many spaces we'll
Capacity.
get anywhere, how much will be
We can
open.
expect some demand.
yeah.
And I'm wondering why we wouldn't do 250,000 out of ARPA, since we have 1.9 in ARPA, and we talked a lot about ARPA supporting childcare.
Yeah, and the reason there is that part of the benefit accrues directly to us as an employer versus the whole community. And I think the ARPA funds are for the whole community. So this will provide a benefit to both. That's why you saw the recommendation to split, just to recognize the benefit that would accrue to us and to reserve some of those ARPA funds, hopefully for another project that's community-wide. Do you have the option to use ARPA funds? Yeah, I think we could justify using the full ARPA funds. I felt as an employer and knowing the intent of the funds that you should also have the option of recognizing the internal benefit and using general fund for that.
I would say there are employers locally that do have like childcare benefit to employees, whether that's like paying off their FSA contributions every year or something like that. So it's not sort of out of sorts comparably for us to provide a similar employer
No, I don't think it's
benefit.
out of sorts at all. I just was wondering what the selection process might be. And then so I'm assuming you've vetted this, and that's why it's come to us in this form.
It
And
has
that's-
been a very quick vetting, in all honesty.
vet.
I will say, it feels quick, and there are parts of it that are quick, but I have a lot of confidence in our understanding of the employer-based grant for this reason. 6 months ago, an organization called EPIC, which runs childcare-related solutions across the state, launched what they called a design lab cohort. So it was 6 months leading up to this grant application. And so Michelle, myself, a couple other folks who work on childcare in the region were able to attend 9 sessions. Each session was 2 hours long, and they walked us through one aspect of childcare and kind of taught us what it looks like for that to be kind of best practice. So one was all about wages and recruitment and what kind of benefits and schedules you give employees. Another one was all about how you set up your room and what kind of materials. Another was how you communicate with parents. It was like the full gamut from start to finish of best practice childcare. So Michelle and I are now very versed on kind of best practices, and all of it was to lead employers up to applying for this grant.
Awesome.
So I feel really familiar with the grant and around childcare now than I ever did. I think Michelle does too. And Blue Lake Preschool was able to participate with us, even though they knew most of that and run a really great program. They got a couple resources from that too. So that's actually one of the things that gives us a lot of points on this application, is that we were participants in the
Right.
design lab. So what I meant by, like, we've been knowing that this was coming for 6 months, we didn't know if we were going to apply or not. So that's why we didn't bring it to you sooner. But once we decided to apply, we said, you know, we feel really confident, we have a strong grant application, and Pitkin seems like a great partner with Town of Basalt.
And the other piece that I felt mitigated the risk is the shell is there, right? And so a lot of the building risk, you you experience most of your risk when you dig the hole and you find out what's really underground and then coming out. So there's, I think, a lot lower risk in these finishing numbers at this point. We have a partner that is already running daycare, and then a municipal partner overseeing that we have good experience with. So we felt like the risk profile of this was pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly, and then Greg?
Yeah, just so some clarification related to this. So the teachers who would be employed here would also be eligible for our stipend program, because now they'd be an additional new provider in Pickens County, whereas Blue Lake is not currently.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question.
But that's only up for another year or year and a half.
Till the end of 2025, but we have had a number of providers downsize, and some are going away, so the budget will still remain the same.
That's too bad.
I know.
You know, and yeah, it's too bad.
Just wanted to ask, just regarding the mix, I understand your logic regarding general fund versus ARPA funding. Can that balance change? Can that ratio change if you find out something different in the next 3 months or?
Absolutely,
you
and
could
that's within the appropriation authority of the board. And again, I think you could make the decision to fully use ARPA funds. I felt like from a public policy perspective, the split represented the
sense.
intent of the funds.
And then if
And
the
for
ratio
the
could change.
purposes of today, or for the grant application, we would need to just state what our total match contribution is. The grant application doesn't
Right,
care
so
where
that
we're
they
pulling
don't
it
care where the
from.
money's coming
So
from, right?
we can
Okay,
figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, John, in the interim, can we maybe pull our staff? Because if they're looking at sometime down the line doing the infant and toddler, because I know it takes more to do to provide infant spaces is much more difficult, much more expensive because of the space that you need, et cetera. I'd like to see what the needs are of our employees. I mean, how many need infant care and how many need the different age group care? Because that's of concern to me as far as we do have a need of our employees, but it may be for infant care. We know we have a lot of new babies, and they're not, that's somewhere down the line in this facility.
Yeah, and I think,
Could we just poll our employees now and just say,
yeah, and I think
grant.
we did some of that polling, and it'll be point in time, right? That's going to shift.
well, they grow older, but,
Well, and we get new employees,
yeah.
and
But I just think,
Fall in love and get married.
and I say on your first date, you better sign up for childcare spaces, just in case. But I think you need to, I would just like to have some kind of idea as to what the needs of, because maybe it would be better for us to put a little more money and get the infant childcare in there if we see that as a more urgent need.
and we may have some of that from some of our polling.
Yeah,
previous polling
that
too,
would be
so I'll
great
take a look.
information, I think, to share with us.
And I haven't had a chance to connect with John on this. Town of Basalt has asked us to strengthen the grant application if we decide to sign on with a 1-question poll, but we could maybe make it a 2-question poll of our employees in the next week, just so that we
next
can
week?
show, just so we can show some, like, because we have retirement
Wednesday,
data.
we have
And
to Wednesday.
we have, we know how many kids are on our insurance, and we have some data around it, but it just a point in time count and a point in time count of need. But I do agree, Patty, we can do some deeper dives.
And the
into
kids that are on our insurance could be 26 and probably still do need childcare.
Steve?
Well, I was thinking that if we had X number of spots reserved for Pickens County employees and we don't need them all, it just goes to the, employees who work in Pickens County to their kids. But the poll that Patty is saying, let's do this, that would give us some idea on the percentage of the funding that we pull from the ARPA. Maybe we want to pull more from the ARPA and less from the general fund. Or, something like that, based on our anticipated how many kids do we think from Pickens County employees will be using the service?
Well, I am a thumbs up for pursuing this at both
Yeah.
levels, both the first and second level. How about you,
Absolutely.
Greg? Kelly is?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just think we need more information, but it'll be coming forward in the next week, in the next 3 months, one way or the other.
So I have to tell you guys, I'm thinking about Stott's Mill, and knowing Joe Few and Lonnie Stott, and having picked up lumber at the sawmill there on that property, I'm thinking of this whole history of it and how the Few Ranch there is now Basalt South, and
That makes you an
the
old timer.
Stott's Mill. It's like this. It's just an amazing legacy that an Italian immigrant family, that their land is being used for this. To me, it's pretty amazing and exciting. So I'm excited about the daycare possibility there.
One of the houses at Stott's Mill, it comes from the Phoenix House place that I've told you guys about, where they do the amazing pre-constructed houses with outrageously environmental materials, and they do it in like a week. Like, they get your plans, and they have a series of plans, and you choose your plans, and they do it in like a week, and then they deliver it, and it's just
It's one of the ones at
amazing
Stocks.
company.
I'll have to go by and see it.
What?
It's one of the ones at Stocks?
And so one of the Stott's Mills houses is from Phoenix House.
Cool.
Yeah, it's in
We
Grand
should do a
Junction.
tour.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm super interested in this, and I know it feels a little rushed, but the risk here feels very manageable. And, we've been on the other side of this where we've not been able to move quickly and have watched grants pass us by that, have lost opportunities for the community. So I'm glad we're on the front side of this one. Let us know how else we can sort of lobby support for it as we need to, and I'd be happy to do that.
So Francie, be ready to sign a letter in the next 24 hours or less.
Ready.
Thank you all so much for the time and your willingness to kind of work with us on this. Michelle, do you
And
have
Michelle, I
everything
hope
you
you
need?
feel better.
I just
Thank
wanted
you
to,
all so much. I really appreciate your support, and I know this is super meaningful for the town, and thank you for letting me join you via Zoom.
I'm thrilled to have another relationship with Basalt.
We like basalt.
Francie, if I could just add that I think just if they should give some reference to our climate conscious ambitions for buildings that we're involved in. And it sounds like Basalt is certainly on board. I think they are. But they could articulate that in the letter, and I think that would be helpful for us as well as for anybody else who's looking at this.
Can do.
And I'll
Thank
just
you,
say,
guys.
very side note, but I had written to Shannon from Response a little while ago about updating on their grant. She said they just presented to the State Housing Board like 20 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
And are waiting for the vote on their
Wow.
project. So,
Cool.
Well,
Great, thank you.
How much is that grant?
that was like $4 million, right?
4 million?
Been hearing positive feedback on that.
Oh, good.
That's great. Okay,
Thanks,
well, I think we're going to take a little break here before we go to the airport.
Well, we don't see the airport for half an hour.
The airport
Well, we're due
is
for a
in 20
break.
minutes, and we're due for a break. So that's what I'm recommending we do.
Maybe I'll go
Just take
close
a
the
break.
windows of my car.
Well, the sun's out now.
thought-
Windows are open.
Well, they
Should
were-
leave them
they
open
were
so the sun
cracked.
can
They
dry
were
it.
I
cracked.
thought you rode your bike.
Not today. I was in too big a rush in hauling.
Welcome back to the work session for the Pitkin County Board of Commissioners on Tuesday, August 22nd. We are going to spend some time at the airport. And I'm sure Dan will introduce everybody who's been working on this report.
I will do that. Well, good afternoon. Dan Bartholomew, Airport Director. We're here to just discuss some pavement analysis we've been doing recently on the airport's runway. And here is our pavement engineering consultants. We have from Kimberly Horn, we have Casey Admonson, and we have Nick Hogan and Heath Hildenbrandt.
Well, nice to see
from
you
Kimberly
guys.
Horn.
Thank you. The report was a bit intimidating. I tried to work my way through some of the graphs and everything, and I said, I think I'll go to the summary.
Yep. But to provide a little background, I don't know, John, if you have anything you wanted to talk about before we get into the analysis, or?
No, I would just note for the board that, this is right now us bringing information about the pavement analysis that was conducted. This was conducted pursuant to, I think, as Dan's probably going to talk about, but we'll just say it twice, some cracking and such that was observed. That led us to really start to look at some of the subsurface issues. Mm-hmm. This was an item that was discussed very briefly during the vision process, only in the sense that it was recognized, as we'll also probably talk about at some point in the presentation, that our runway was built in sections and rebuilt in sections. It's all different ages. It has different structure underneath. I think as we learned, maybe some different pavement depths in different parts of the runway, depending on the portion that was built. And we recognized that at some point, it was likely that at least some sections of the runway would have to be rebuilt. I think we did not anticipate some of the conditions that you'll hear today. But today is not about having to make urgent decisions, but it is important, I think, background information for you to have as we're going through our conversations about airport layout plan and some of the urgency that we might be feeling, or our partners in the FAA might be feeling to move forward with some things. So this is informational at this point. It'll give you a sense of conditions at the airport, but it's not something that we need to react to right away. That'd be my
You're discouraging
opening.
a gasp among us.
Well, and it's not to push any specific decisions, right, or decision-making processes. This is information that's important for us to understand that will likely affect our capital plan and maintenance plans as we go through our broader planning at the airport. So, Dan, that's your fault for handing me the mic.
I assume you're not predicting a positive change in our plans.
It depends how you define that, but yeah.
There was a big pause in that response.
So yeah, as John mentioned, we do have some slides here, and the team will take you through some of the history of how we got to this point. But as John did mention, the pavement's not going to fail tomorrow, but it's not something we can ignore either. So I guess that's probably a good way to put it. Until we need to do some additional investigations and look into how it can be addressed. But again, it's not a danger. It's not a safety issue. It's not going to fail tomorrow, but it's imminent. So with that, I'll pass it, I think, to Casey.
Yep, I'll get us started. And as John mentioned, your runway has been kind of quilted together. This is a timeline to show how the airport has grown. And basically starting in '57 when it was first paved, we had that 60-foot width, and then we extended it, and then we widened it, and then we extended it and widened it. So you can imagine that there's a bunch of different sections that piece your runway together. So, and then as you're looking through these dates, you can only imagine that the FAA specifications for the pavement sections have changed through that timeline as well. So don't have to sink so much of this information in is just to give you a visual of from the very beginning to now that your runway has been quilted together. I'll point to the last couple ones here, though. The extension was done in 2011. That was the last time we had a new section added to the runway. And then in 22, we did a 3-inch mill and overlay, but that was only to the keel section. If you go to the next slide, this exhibit shows the AIP funded projects, so the FAA funded projects for pavement maintenance across the airport over the last couple years. So we're talking about 21 to now. So you can see it's again, we're just doing pavement maintenance to the necessary areas. It's again a quilt, and we're highlighting that we're using the funds available to address the issues that we see at the surface. I wanted to give you this background because as we start to move into how we got to do this evaluation, it all began when we were starting to, you can go ahead to the next one. Go ahead.
Quick question about what is the keel section?
Sorry.
And I don't know what the colors mean, sorry.
If we go back, so the keel section is the main section of the runway, is where the aircraft
Where the
is.
rubber hits the
Yes,
road.
exactly. And so we're not doing full width. We're doing the main section. So we're hitting the part that needs is the most important.
In your testing.
So is that
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
deeper? Is it
50 feet
the
or
center's
so.
deeper
Yeah,
than
it's
the
like the
rest of the
middle.
runway?
It's the same thickness. It's just that's the part that's getting
Being
pounded
hammered.
regularly. So
Thank
the
you.
as you go to the outer portions, they're not getting impacted as much as that middle section.
And that's the keel.
Yes, yeah.
I look forward to using that next time.
And what is the blue on the taxiway? We can't read that.
It's a boat term.
Legend. Well,
That-
maybe if I turn around, I can.
Really, not to go full depth. This is just to give an exhibit of we're not, for Orange, for example, we're not doing the whole runway when we're doing a treatment on the runway. We were doing the area that
Sections.
needed help.
Right. Band-Aids.
Yes, exactly. So just, there's no need to really understand the text on here. It's really the visual of the colors and see that we're piecemealing the pavement maintenance together.
So is the keel section where the planes are landing, is that right where the culvert goes underneath for Owl Creek also, or is that a little bit offset from
Think the alignment of the runway. So that keel section is going to be that middle part of the runway that runs the length of the runway, where Owl Creek is transverse to the runway. So essentially, yes, everything on the runway will cross Owl Creek, but the keel section is just focused on the middle section of the structural part of
Like
that
the
runway.
middle lane.
Where the
kind of.
black
Yeah.
rubber is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any more questions on
That's
this
it, thank
exhibit? Okay. And then, so going back to how we got to this report that we put out, in September 21, our team went out to do a visual inspection on the runway to figure out what that project was going to be for the 22 year. When we put this together, the thought was we would go down 6 inches on that keel section and do just crack repair and fill those cracks elsewhere. When we met with FAA, proposed our project, we put together a core program to actually take sections of the pavement out to see what we would actually be doing if we milled down 6 and put back 6. we didn't expect to really find pulling out some of these cores, and I think it gets to some of these other photos later on, but to see that really that upper section of that pavement was in better shape than the lower section of the pavement. And so by milling down 6 inches, it really wasn't to solve the problem. We did have surface cracks, and so our maintenance program for that year was only going to go down 3 inches, because why go down 6 inches if it really wasn't going to solve the problem? So in development of this 23 year, we decided to do further analysis on the runway and do non-destructive testing to get a better look of what's really going on further down in the section. So that's how we got to today to present some of the information that we've gathered from that non-destructive testing. I think if we go further, I think we may have.
I have a really dumb
sure.
question. So these are like a 3-inch diameter core, and you pull them out. Do you put them back in, or do you
We
just
fill
pour
them.
cement?
We
You just
fill
pour
them.
stuff in.
Yeah,
Okay.
we
I
have-
know that was really stupid. I just so curious.
No, it's a good question. I mean, it matters what you put back in its
Yeah.
place, so it's not a bad question. But we were not expecting to find that bottom part of that section to be degraded. So as far as I think once we get further into the presentation here, there'll be a core that will see that the top 7 inches were intact and the bottom 7 were gone. So we'll start to get into that.
Can I just, what is the average, what is the norm when FAA or whatever says you need to test your runway, your pavement surfaces? Is it, do they say you have to go down 12 or you can only go 6? Or, so my question is, why did we decide to go below the good 6 into the bad 6?
As far as, repeat your questions, so I answer it correctly. So as far as are you talking about the mill and overlay or the
No, is there
initial
a norm when
design?
you're testing for your pavement surfaces? Is there a norm that's recommended, like you go 6 inches? You test for 6. Is there
No,
something
we
that's...
go down until we know we've hit all the actual asphalt. So once we
go
no
to this
longer,
clay surface or whatever, this
Yeah.
the compacted sand or whatever it might
once
be there.
we're stop getting asphalt, we stop.
Is there a
so-
norm set by FAA? Is that the norm you go down to, you hit raw soil?
It depends on what you're looking for. For this particular project, we really needed to find out what the thickness is of the asphalt, and then also figure out if what we are proposing was the right approach to the pavement maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
So, tagging on to
Yeah.
that, what is beneath the asphalt? Like if it's on clay, it's different than if it's on a gravelly soil.
I would like for Nick to get further into his presentation, because I think that question gets answered further on here.
And I know it talked about clay on one section of it, so.
Yeah.
And compacted sand on another.
Yeah, so let's dive into the analysis and what this task is really kind of focused around. So good afternoon, my name is Nick Hogan. I work specifically in airfield pavements with Heath and Casey here. And so for this project, as Casey mentioned, we're looking at asphalt cores. So generally a pavement structure is asphalt on top with supported by a rock section, and then beneath that is your sand or subgrade, as they refer to it. And so although we're focusing more around the asphalt right now, what this non-destructive testing does is it looks at the whole structure. So it looks at all the different layers, and I'm going to go through a couple of maps to kind of show a score or a health check, let's say, on those different layers, so we can kind of identify where problems are. Just backing up one slide, the general goals of this task are to evaluate the runway strictly from a structural pavement lens. So this is not answering all the questions for the runway, but strictly looking at it only as a structure and whether it's supporting or degrading. And then through the degradation that we find, determining what appropriate repairs there are to remediate those issues. So as I mentioned, the asphalt, it generally relies on what's beneath it as opposed to concrete. So those are going to be two different pavements that we typically use in airfields. And so asphalt, being a flexible structure, relies on that. So what we noticed was that there's a lot of variability to the pavement structure out there and the materials. And then also there's some environmental factors that are impacting it. So as Casey mentioned, this is supposed to be a 14-inch core of asphalt. And all that we were able to extract was 7 inches due to the bottom 7 actually fell apart upon extraction. And so that generally tips you off that there's something that's a bigger issue beneath this.
Can I ask you a question about the asphalt versus concrete?
Yeah,
Because
please.
we just redid our entire roundabout, which was asphalt and which was being damaged by the buses and everything, in concrete.
Okay.
So why do we have asphalt for airplanes to land on instead of concrete?
It's a great question, and that's something we need to look at going forward for you all. It's something for us to consider in the future. I can say there's different potential construction durations and repair scenarios. You are a single runway system. It does take longer to install concrete, and to repair that in the future, it does mean shutdowns, whereas with asphalt, generally you can kind of mill and fill it overnight and keep your runway open for the most part.
I see.
And
So it's
concrete's more expensive as well.
It is more expensive, but usually, benefit cost, we can look at that over time. Sometimes it saves you money.
Yeah, I
over
was gonna
time.
say, long-term, it could be better.
Yeah.
So it absorbs the impact better than asphalt.
It distributes the load.
Oh.
So yeah, each of those concrete panels distributes the load better. That's not to say that asphalt can't support the same that concrete can, but generally, like Keith alluded to, there's a life cycle cost analysis to what's the maintenance going to be, how much is traffic going to be changing, and when do we want to basically be repaving this road or roundabout.
Well, I mean, as a runner, I definitely prefer asphalt to concrete.
Sure.
It's much more forgiving.
Yes.
So, I might be true for runways as well, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a lot behind that. So,
Thank you.
yeah, of course.
And there's a historical component also, I assume, as this airport has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. It started as a small asphalt, it was probably tar or dirt runway to begin
It
with.
was
and
dirt
then
to begin with.
Tar and then asphalt, and so building up on that, you'd have to remove all of it to put in concrete, or you just add another layer of asphalt
Good
over
point,
the
Greg.
decades.
Yeah,
So
good
this
point.
is the legacy of the runway we're looking
Right.
at.
Great point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
exactly right.
sense. Well, thanks for that digression.
Yeah. So getting into the results of this analysis. I'll get into the equipment and how it operates, but real quick, let's walk through the different layers, starting at the surface and then working our way down to the soil. And so what you're looking at here is kind of a stoplight condition as far as green is good and red obviously is poor. And so in several locations throughout the length of the runway, there is some degraded asphalt that we're noticing. The large clump of red dots in the middle of the runway is where that core was extracted that had 7 inches that ultimately fell apart.
Is that one of the more intense landing zones or touchdown zones, or is that water damage? What do you think is?
So our understanding is that there is water damage that's causing it. It is not due to overloading that bottom 7 inches is degrading. Typically, you'll see that kind of occur throughout the entire asphalt section, whereas this we were seeing the top was well intact, whereas the bottom was not.
Okay.
And it's a phenomenon called asphalt stripping. And basically, asphalt is the rock and the bituminous binder that's holding it all together. And in that stripping, which is typically due to the asphalt sitting in water, it removes that binder and then it basically returns to its ingredients.
Gravel.
Yep. So then moving down through the pavement structure, we have our aggregator rock base course beneath it. And as you can notice, there's several locations where that too is seemingly compromised and not performing as it was designed. And then further moving down to our subgrade soils, we notice that there's two completely different soils beneath the runway. On the north end, where you're seeing much more red, that is clay soils, which typically don't provide the same amount of support for a structure as does the gravel and sand that we found on this southern portion of the runway.
It was that clay was trucked in. It was an intentional media that they were using. It wasn't like Manco's shale that they found. They actually brought clay in.
Really?
Well, that's why I'm
He's
asking
asking.
that as an
Or is
engineer.
that just? what
We
was
don't
there?
know where the clay originated.
I'm not sure how they brought it in when it was paved, but like Casey said, it was over several projects, so it very well could be native beneath the pavement
Yeah.
there.
Oh, really?
You could ask the Stapletons how the hay grew on different
Right.
parts, and you would know where the clay was and where it was sand.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so this just so happens to almost be split down the middle as far as where that clay is.
Wow.
So real quick, for those who are unfamiliar, this is the testing equipment that was utilized. It's a heavyweight deflectometer, and you can see it there on the right in blue. Ultimately, it drops a weight, and then sensors called geophones at different locations from that weight drop are basically sensing how much that pavement surface moves, and then it informs at the different layers of that pavement structure how well they're performing the material composition. That is what led us to be able to produce those heat maps, as we're referring to them, of the different conditions. And ultimately, that tells us what's beneath the surface, because we can walk the runway and see the distresses on the surface themselves, but generally it takes time for them to reflect up to the surface. And this has kind of given us a peek behind the curtain in a sense of what's causing those distresses at the surface to actually happen. So generally we want to talk about we have these issues. There's this heat map saying that there's some degradation. What's our fix? And so we're working through seeing kind of how best to remediate these bad or poor materials. But ultimately, until we can get something accomplished, there's going to be maintenance that goes along with keeping the runway safe and operable. And so, as you can see in the photo here, this is actually one of the paving sections that was done in 2022, I believe, where the frost heave actually had already moved the pavement up in one area.
Wow.
It's a year.
And so, going back to that subgrade soil, the clay soil is generally much more susceptible to that frost heaving.
Yeah.
And so, at the surface, then we're going to see a lot of cracking just from that.
So
But-
does that mean that in the future, in order to have a viable runway, we have to go in and remove the clay?
Not necessarily. When clay is saturated, it causes much more issues than when it's not. So it very well could perform better. However,
If it
currently
weren't
doesn't
wet.
have the drainage. So a permeability study could be performed to kind of look at how that clay soil is treating the water that's being present. Because kind of coming back to this heat map, a lot of the areas in that core that we took kind of had some of that bad soil beneath it. And if that clay is not permeable and it's holding water there, and your asphalt's sitting in it as well, it's going to cause this stripping, and that asphalt will need to be removed. It can't be improved. Whereas
So
this,
it's going to be a question of which is a more effective and cost-effective manner, either changing the whole drainage or taking out the clay. One.
potentially, yes.
Yeah.
So it's also saying that drought is a good thing for the airport.
Not if Owl
And the
Creek is running
heat
through
created
there.
by climate change is a good thing because we won't have frost heave.
Yes.
You'd have to have,
This last year was a
Owl
lot
Creek
of
dried up.
precipitation. So kind of as we're looking at that subgrade soil, the material that's getting degraded, we're also looking at that drainage. Because as Casey mentioned earlier, there was a lot of water coming up through the cracks at the surface.
wow.
So that's kind of another, not the focus of this. As I mentioned, this is a structural analysis, but there does need to be a look into where that water's
I
coming
was
from,
gonna say
how
where the
best
water's
to
coming from.
remove that away from that pavement.
And that can create ice on the surface as well?
Potentially, I mean, I'm not too sure where it would freeze first, subsurface prior to coming up to the surface, but it
Sounds
potentially
like
could.
some of our county road issues.
Yeah.
Coming up in the middle.
So I guess kind of to start moving towards a close, you know, there's more analysis that needs to be done on what's the correct fix. But until then, and Heath and Casey can contribute to this as well, there's going to need to be ongoing maintenance in addition to the exhibit we showed earlier in the areas that have been treated recently. It's only going to continue to grow to be more and more area that requires that. And as we move into future years, it's going to become more frequent as well as probably more costly.
But not more dangerous?
Potentially, if stuff is going unmissed, certainly. But luckily, with a structure this thick, it does take time to come to the surface. And we can't exactly forecast how much time, but it will then need to be treated on like an emergency repair situation.
Didn't you say something like some areas might be 6 years out? Is that what I saw? And some are more
I'm not
for
sure.
failure?
In the report for the.
Maybe I made that up, but I thought I saw
I
that.
think they're referring to the tables that we had talked about yesterday that said, you know, the pavement life, 5 years.
Yeah.
The report itself. Yeah, so that's a different analysis where it's more looking at the interaction of the planes and the pavement structure for all the different pieces of that quilt that we were talking about.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the message here is that maintenance is going to need to be a battle up until something more permanent can be done to address the material issues.
Excuse me. Are you going to talk about what that repair is, or are we just assuming it's laying more asphalt?
There's really a lot more study and investigation before we can make a
I
recommendation
see.
on a repair. This is really just kind of reporting the results of
Okay.
what we're seeing. And we really need to figure out, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle to figure out the best approach on this.
Go ahead, Patty.
Well, I have to tell you that I'm surprised it's not more emergent and worse. So I thank you for that. I think maintenance is always a concern for us at this airport. I think the history of not knowing the underlying geology, whether it's been brought in or whether it's native, is always a concern because it started as a dirt runway, then went to probably chip and seal, gravel, who knows. And so, it's grown through that. Of course, ideally, it would be great if we could rip it all out, put in all new soil, and take away the old soil, but we don't have that luxury, both on availability of soil coming in or a place to put soil going out. So I think keeping an eye on it, further study makes sense, especially seeing what we can do to identify where the water sources are coming from and how we might be able to mitigate that. Makes great sense. In other words, instead of continuing to fix the problem by putting new pavement in, let's fix the problem that's causing us the need to do the maintenance. And I think that makes total sense. And I know funding is going to be an issue, but I think we don't have really any choice in continuing to maintain what we have out there until we have a determination on the airport layout plan and what we're going to do as far as that. And then that's the bigger decision for me anyway.
And there will come a time when, the patching and repairing probably won't be sufficient. I think that's, from what I can appreciate from our engineering friends, difficult to project what that is.
Yeah, but I was thinking it would be tomorrow.
No, not,
I'm feeling a
and
little
that's why I
relieved by
wanted
that.
to lead, with that. But there's a balance point here that our conditions have reached a point where there's some urgency to doing the longer term fix, but it's not emergent. We don't have to make a precipitous kind of decision.
Except that 5 years in government pacing is tomorrow.
It is, there's some urgency to that, yeah. And so that's, it's important that the board have this context and understanding that, the rebuild is really what the long-term fix is at some point, however that occurs, right? And I think the FAA will be paying attention to that. So we will have those funding conversations, Patty, and who's paying for
Well,
what
there's
and
a
what
lot.
share and those sorts of things. But your basic point is right. We've got to keep the runway safe.
And keep the FAA as friends.
and try and do that at the same time. Yep.
I think we can do that.
And we're already in that process. I mean, the ALP is the first step in that process. So we'll get there eventually. We're going to have to, but it's a ways off.
It's a race.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step would be to continue looking at studies and identifying the root causes of the problems and what we can mitigate.
Yeah, I think really just to kind of hit on that great segue, here's our final slide
Oh,
up here.
Thank you.
But really, as Dan said, we really, the next step is we need to have a final ALP approved by the FAA before they even think about funding this. So that's first and foremost. And right behind that, right after that, we have to finalize our environmental document or update that environmental document as well. Once we do those two steps, the FAA will be able to talk about studies and funding to get this thing studied and recommend the right solution at that point. The FAA will basically be able to go down that road. And then once we have a recommended solution, at that point we'll begin programming, look at design, look at how this thing gets built, look at costs, things of that nature.
But can we look at some steps now in the more near term as far as looking at those water sources? Because I think if we wait for all these other things, that we will have seen a lot more damage caused by water. So that would be a self-funding out of our own pocket. I'd hate to just put that off until all these other things are done. If there's something we can start now to look at the water sources and what we might be able to do to mitigate. It could be something simple, like a new drainage system, or...
Yeah, the FAA may or may not fund something like that, but...
I'm saying we may have to look at it out of our own pocket.
Yeah. But
So
I think it
go
could
ahead.
potentially be valuable information
I think we'll-
regardless of how we end
Valuable
up.
but necessary.
Go, Steve.
For the temporary repairs, does the FAA have a pain threshold beyond which they're not going to fund repairs? Maybe we need a 3-inch overlay on the whole length of the runway or something, which
They're gonna pay
I don't
for
know what
that.
the cost of that would be, but the FAA might reach a point that they say, we're throwing good money after bad, and we're not going to fund this anymore at this point.
I hope they're not
Yeah.
listening to you saying that, but yeah.
When does that happen?
Yeah,
At
you know-
what number of tens of millions of dollars
I think
of
they're close.
repairs?
That's hard to say, actually, because that's a case-by-case basis. I think what they would be doing at this point, though, again, is waiting for us to get the ALP. Because it's, again, it's not an imminent thing, and the ALP is imminent in all practical aspects. So I think they would wait until that point to make any decisions for something like that. And then once that's done, that opens us up to funding and various funding sources and things such as that. So the options are there. So I think they would wait till that time to be able to do that.
And just to add on to that, I think, the dilemma is the one that we've talked about, previously, is that we have an ALP right now that has the runway in a different place than it is now. And so it's unlikely that the FAA would make significant investments to do any kind of major kind of rebuild or even kind of off-cycle maintenance, major maintenance, which is what we're going to have to do. When we have an ALP that is reflective of that placement and such, then the funding questions and the rebuild questions become different.
Yeah, another thing to know with this annual maintenance, it does require a closure on an almost annual basis for 2 to 4 weeks. So there is that consideration as well that comes along with the annual maintenance.
We hear about that a lot.
What is the future maintenance schedule for the next 18 months? Do we know?
Well, we took a cursory look at the pavement across the whole airfield yesterday, so it probably give us some ideas.
Yeah, we looked at some areas on the runway. There's, I would recommend that we continue with that keel section, but also there's a section at the north end that I think should receive some attention. There's a smaller section on the taxiway A, and then another section on taxiway B. I would also recommend probably a seal coat go down on the runway this year with additional crack seal.
So a lot of this was unanticipated maintenance, and I think we'll have a little bit more of that with the uncertainty of the subsurface conditions. So
So
we're going to be
this-
developing a new maintenance plan around that.
And is that typically funded through entitlement funding?
Yes.
So in the report, there are some forecasts for the number of departures and arrivals at the airport that don't coincide necessarily with our fleet mix forecasts, and I'm just wondering where those tables came from in the report.
Well, they should coincide with because we use the fleet mix forecast from the ALP.
It has the MVOR as having a tremendous number of departures, or this is departures, and the Airbus being significantly lower. So I'm just wondering about what is that?
I don't know off the top, I mean, I couldn't answer off the top of my head without going through.
Where did they come from?
That should have all come from
That
our,
seems right.
The forecast.
forecast and fleet mix numbers that came out of that study.
That's very interesting. What?
What
I'm
page?
looking at page 23 right now.
There is, there's an interim period too. It depends on where that's being factored in between the
Time.
Depends on
conversion.
what?
The interim period between now
Uh-huh.
and 2042, let's say. So, there's going to be a time when the CRJ goes out of service.
Right.
The Embraer is going to be the dominant commercial service aircraft before an Airbus comes in, if it ever
Okay.
does. So,
But still, we're looking at 20 years out. So, in 2022, it definitely shows the CRJ 700 being significantly more than any other.
Of course.
But then it switches over at 2042, and I just thought, well, that's interesting because, the Airbus is less than, it's like a third.
It's just a number of flights. It's not a proportion of the total.
Yeah. Well,
Just
what else is
operation.
the
Only
number
Air-
of flights
and only
besides a
America, or
proportion
only
of the total?
Delta was gonna buy, is forecasted to have them, which only provides 3% of our.
And it's just
commercial travel.
operations is all it is from the aircraft standpoint. We didn't have a significant number of the Airbus operating even in 2042. But until I look at it, I couldn't give you a definitive answer.
Okay.
So it's showing the Embraer, which is the 175,
Mhm.
being the one, and that's what's anticipated in the
That's-
interim before we get the Airbus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when will we see an updated maintenance plan? Will that come to us?
Yeah, we can bring it back to you. So what we do every year, Kimberly Horn comes out and they inspect the pavement. And then they put together a plan for the maintenance in the following year. So they're doing it now for 2024 because we have to put in for an FAA grant, get them to approve the funding for it. So yes, we can certainly.
I don't
bring
know
it
if
to
it
you.
normally does, but.
We've
of our budget
typically,
process?
we've typically brought it forward, but it's at a high level, Kelly, in budget. So if the board wants to take a deeper dive into what we're doing, we probably want to do a separate work session on that, which
I mean,
we
I think
could.
we've lobbed this question
Have a
into the
retreat,
community
Jeff. Yeah.
sphere that it might
Yeah.
merit an answer. in the
And merit
community
more of a,
sphere.
and, I guess I'd look to our engineering friends for confirmation on this, but my understanding is that because of the uncertainty of the conditions, we're probably going to have some more unexpected maintenance that comes up from time to time outside of the plans. Even though we'll be adjusting our plans to these new circumstances.
And I think
but
we're expecting the unexpected at the maintenance.
it's so hard to do that.
Now when you've been around as long as I
And
have.
I believe that the last time we submitted the CIP, that a runway project was in the plan for this next year, so runway maintenance.
Your presentation was much less drastic than the report. Because, the report says, for instance, segment 7 depletes, the remaining life is 1 to 4 years, less than 5, and the asphalt has a remaining life of only 4 years for segment 12. That sounds drastic.
Well,
And Francie, I had, as a layperson, not an engineer or such, I had the exact same reaction. So we met yesterday, it's like, whoa.
Right.
And that's the
And-
difference between engineering technology, terminology.
Right.
You know, they'll use words, when something's really imminent, they'll use catastrophic, terms like that. If it's imminent and failure, those are kind of like not as bad of a term as you use in your daily life. So that's where there's a little bit of a mismatch.
On a medical level, though, France used gasping.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and that's
I was gasping when I read this.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Well, and that's why I wanted to open with, like, this is urgent, yes, but it's not catastrophic. We don't have immediate safety issues. We do have issues that we're going to need to be addressing, and hopefully the next 5 to 7 years.
In other words,
Yeah.
rather than gasp, we can take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Understand that we do need to make some decisions to move forward, whatever those are. And we're gonna probably have some more expenditures on the maintenance side than we normally would.
It means we can't really dilly-dally, actually, what it means to me.
We have to be vigilant, I'd say.
Think
That's
of
a
it as like
technical term.
the visit with your doctor, and he says, hey, you need to watch this or that. We need to get ahead of this. This is kind of like your warning. Like, hey, this is going to creep up on you. We need to pay attention to it. We need to take care of it, but we have time to take care of it.
Kelly?
Yeah, little separate but related. I would like to request if we could schedule some work session time specifically on the ALP to understand kind of where we're at, what goes into that, kind of decision points all along the way. Because I guess I'm just a little unclear as far as how detailed that gets, if our terminal is in the shape of a triangle instead of a square, does that need to be shown effectively on the ALP? Like those, I just don't fully get it.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that
And
I
also
understand what's
what
going
impact.
on. I understand where the decisions are that we intervene on, that the community will be invited to intervene on. So if that's okay with the board to schedule.
Yeah,
that.
and also what impact this has on the ALP, this prediction.
Honestly, I don't think this has much of an impact because we're looking at an ALP approval hopefully within the next, let's say, next summer, next fall, sometime by the time it gets to the FAA process. We're not looking at, catastrophic pavement issues within that time frame. So luckily, I'd say the bonus to this is we're out in front of it. And we're going through the process that we have to go through to get FAA's attention and funding and mitigation of it. So the ALP current process isn't getting in the way of that at this point in time. But absolutely, I think having a discussion on where we are in the ALP, where it goes, what it shows, what it doesn't, I think that'd be great.
It may affect like how some of the phases, do they need to go in parallel versus, in sequence and such. But we can bring that back into a work session because the ALP is not as detailed. It's more of a space reservation kind of exercise with a lot of that design to come. So.
Question about the Owl Creek crossing. Do you have any ideas about, does that part need to be totally rebuilt ultimately with a different kind of culvert or something, a long-term solution? Because it indicated that that's where the more of the pavement issues were in the vicinity of the culvert. Maybe there's water leaking out of Owl Creek, might be the reason, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Shows it's actually good.
Yeah, there's definitely more study needed there. And the ironic thing is, right over the Owl Creek pipe, it's actually really strong. And that's probably because they dug
Put
out the
pipes under the whole
bad soil
runway.
and put in good soil and compacted it really well.
Uh-huh.
So,
When they
Right.
put in the culvert.
yeah, when they put in the pipe,
Well,
yep.
Then we have a wetlands at one end, we have an aquifer underneath the whole thing. And we have Owl Creek and we have,
But you're right, there's definitely more study that's needed out there to your point earlier, more study about the groundwater and how that's influencing things and where that's coming from, where it's going, and how we can mitigate that for you all.
Okay.
Yeah. So did you guys have a good time touring the airport? No bears, no elk, no moose?
Not this time.
No.
On my first visit, I actually saw a bear on the west side near the Owl Creek.
Yeah.
Right outside the fence.
That was our airport director in costume. We
That was Dan.
Wouldn't put it past him.
He only does that when the FAA guys.
Now imagine you're in an airplane trying to land and you see the bear.
I will add, my career started up in Alaska.
Oh.
So you know bears.
Yes.
You know those grizzly guys, though. Yeah, or those polar bears.
I thought it was a decoration, to be honest, when I first saw it, and then it moved. I was like, oh,
It was too
no,
small.
that's.
The real thing. Yeah.
That's funny.
I hate to say it, but I feel much better than I thought I was going to feel.
So in Alaska, I landed on runways that were built during the Second World War, I presume, and they're gravel runways the whole length.
Yeah.
Now, they don't have CRJs landing on them, but they have some, fairly big airplanes landing on
Yeah.
gravel airstrips.
They have special kits on those aircraft, but that is intentional because of the freeze thaw. It's much easier to maintain those runways, and what they do is just like a surface course on the top. So very different way to approach a runway project, but yeah, that's where I got my initial start in aviation. We were working on those small runways up there, so.
I just have to ask, how do you choose to go into runway airport surfaces? It's just an unusual
It was, not to sidetrack too much, but my background started with geology and
was gonna
geological
say,
engineering. Alaska DOT came to the university to start recruiting for their aviation. They offered me the position with aviation. I was like, I look at rocks. Why do you want me for your airports? I found out that so many of their airports being off the roadway system, that they had to find a lot of local material sources to do their projects. So what they did was hire geological engineers alongside civil engineers to cross-train each other. And so that's my introduction.
Interesting.
Fell in love with the work, and I worked for Alaska DOT for 3 years.
Then she moved to Florida.
Almost. There was Germany in between, but I did land in Florida for 2 years. But I've been in Colorado for the last 7. So,
And you two are both engineers?
Yep. Yeah, I actually started in highway construction and then got into airport engineering.
My uncle was a airport pavement engineer, so I did internships with him growing up in St. Louis at the international airport there. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that falls in your lap and you stick with it. So
Yeah.
Well, Francie, just imagine the recruiter's pitch. You get to work right at the transition point between heaven and earth.
Be it Alaska, Florida, or.
I have one other runway question that's been bugging me for the whole time we've been studying this. So our runway's not, it's not all like straight. It has
yeah.
a dips to it and whatnot. Now, would it be better if our new runway ultimately is just like laser straight, so it's a steady grade the entire length, or is it okay having the sort of, low spot on the north end and then you go up over a little rise?
It's always ideal to have as straight as you can or as flat as you can, but whether that profile can be mitigated and whether the cost benefit to mitigate it is there. And if it's not a safety concern, a lot of times, it's not necessary.
It's like we can't do anything about this steep pitch of our
Exactly.
I
It's
never
sort of a
realized we had.
laser leveling kind of a thing, which
Yeah.
there's equipment that can do that, but it means moving a
lot
lot
of
of
dirt.
material
It's
to
expensive.
accomplish
And a
it
lot of
too.
closure of the airport.
yeah, there's an allowance for curvature, and it doesn't have to be straight. Yeah, and there's a bunch of different runways, but there's an allowance for the change in grade as you go down the length of the runway. So there is a standard for it.
So if you worked in Denver, when the old Stapleton Airport had the bridges that crossed the Interstate 70, where you'd be on the interstate and the plane would come over you on the, so was that a CDOT bridge or an airport bridge?
It's an airport bridge.
Yeah, so you were doing pavement on a bridge over an interstate, but it was an airport.
Yep.
No wonder they were confused at Stapleton.
No, that was when I think they extended the runway and it was.
To the other
it
side of
didn't
the
used to be the
interstate.
interstate, it used to be Smith Road.
Yeah.
And then they just dug the interstate down into the ground and extended that runway right over.
That was always pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
All right, this was great. I love this kind of information, so thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for answering all our random questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope we were entertaining.
I know when I saw those dots, I was like, I don't know how this is all coming together here. But the dots, and then you explained
Yeah.
the sound
So is
testing.
each dot
Look
was a
at
pole
those
or a
bubbles
sound
on those
test?
kids'
Sonic
toys that you
test.
can pop.
That was where, a weight was dropped.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Seismic, sonogram.
Not a gazillion holes in the.
Ultrasound.
Not course.
Yeah, that's just the non-destructive.
And we can just tell the pilots to land on the green spots.
Yes.
Literally 2 full days of driving
every
up
time it
the
Reminds me
rains,
of
I'm
like the
gonna worry
gopher
about
and
the
Caddyshack.
airport.
Full days?
2 full days. Yep.
We're not supposed to have more rain, and we're getting more rain. So Greg, I hope your windows are up. My living room window's still wide open, but
Oh, look at that.
Diane, can you get the car?
Hasn't rained down Bellevue.
oh, wait a minute.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. It was very
Thank
nice
you.
to see all of you. Thanks. And are you flying out, or are you driving to Denver?
4:38 was my flight.
Today?
So, yep.
You're
We
fine.
got- we're gonna
Well,
get you there
traffic
in
out of
time.
town is
Get
longer
going.
than TSA.
We have,
TSA.
You've got an hour to get to the airport. I don't
we
know
have
if you'll make it.
connections at the airport we can call ahead, right, Dan?
Yeah.
No, we don't have that
Take a raft
vertiport.
out.
Thank you,
Take a
guys.
raft out.
Executive access.
No, I thought of you. I'm in the midst of
Vertiport
Scotland
from
thinking.
Wagner.
Oh,
to
boy.
Airport.
Yeah.
Better things to do. I got
Oh,
it.
my gosh.
Just get rid of this airport.
Yeah.
We were like the last ones, they
I
shut the
think
door
we should
behind
make
us as we
one.
get off the plane.
Like a bowling ball or cue ball, cue ball.
Oh, Linda, am I missing something
Meeting for
on
a certain
the
set.
agenda? I don't see Linda on the agenda.
I think that's
See what?
open discussion. This,
She's not on the
I don't know,
agenda.
I have to find this
Because
report.
one time she
See if
was
I'm
in here and she
correct,
was,
but-
and it wasn't on the agenda that I was looking at.
No, she's not on the agenda.
yeah, unless,
We have future agendas.
Linda, am I missing something? Or you're not on our agenda, right? Are you coming?
on the agenda, just in this open session.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Because the last time I did overlook something you were presenting, as I recall.
So I resolved my agenda item with John Peacock already, so I'm good, Francie, believe it or not, on agendas.
Okay, all right, well, let's have a review of open agendas. Do you have any changes coming up for us, John?
Yes, I got a couple things to chat about. Sorry. Actually, why don't we start with Linda, because that is actually the bigger question mark, I think.
Okay,
Linda Dupree, COTC Director. Our issue is that the October 26th EOTC meeting, which would have been the meeting where we discussed and approved the 2024 work plan and budget, City of Aspen is not going to have a quorum at that meeting. They have 2 members going to Japan for a sister city event, and another one is out of town. And so we can either reschedule the EOTC meeting for sometime in November, which is problematic because we have a lot going on in November with an election,
And budget?
budget from the county. Or we can go ahead with the EOTC meeting on the 26th, and then I can have a second presentation on the work plan and budget just with Aspen City Council at another time just with them.
but we won't have a quorum.
Well, Our EOTC bylaws allow for meeting with individual member entities to vote on items. So we can do that with the bylaws, or, yeah.
We did that
'Cause we
for
had that long
exactly this
discussion about
circumstance,
quorums,
actually.
just-
Yeah, we actually made those changes in the bylaws specifically because we had run into this a couple of times, and I believe it was a budget decision that was imminent that got in the way, and convening 3 boards is always more difficult than 1.
So, Charlotte, laid out the issues that the county has in November. So we just need to decide if we want to postpone the work plan and budget meeting for even early December. We could do that.
And that's better than moving it back?
Having all 15 of you in the room together might be better than doing an abbreviated meeting with you all in Snowmass and only 2 Aspen council members. They won't have a quorum to vote at a regular EOTC meeting in October, or we can postpone the whole thing
Any of
till
October?
December. Well,
I mean, like October 12th, or,
we could look at that.
I mean,
If we could move
it
it,
seems like you had a little concern over moving it later into the year.
November's just a problem for the county because that's when we're doing budget and an election. I
and
think
we
one
also
of the
have
days.
the holiday, which
And the holidays.
changes everything up.
Thanksgiving, an election, and the county's budget process.
So
Is gonna make
what
November
about like
problem.
October 12th? Or
We
can
could.
you be ready by then?
We could see. I could get with Aspen to see if we could do it before the 26th.
October 12th?
I can do it any time in October. I would rather get it done, even if we don't have a quorum, than moving into the full EOTC board in November, December, because it's gonna be crazier getting quorums for those 2 months from all of us.
I can't do the 19th. Well, I mean, I could by Zoom, I suppose. I'd have to leave another
I'd
meeting.
have to Zoom on the 19th of October also.
But I
And-
could do the 12th.
Just a note about Zooming. Aspen's members that are going to be in Japan would not have been able to Zoom into
Yeah.
the October 26th meeting
Well,
because
that-
it's the middle of the night.
I can do October 5th or 12th.
Okay.
And
How about the rest of you?
you might look at November 9th also. Let's see, elections on the 7th.
November 9th was one date that Aspen proposed. And then, of course,
Well-
this all makes all those prep
We have a
meetings
work session
problematic,
on
too.
November 9th, the BOCC does?
That's correct, and
Yeah.
Steve, we'll probably be pretty chock full on budget at
On
that
the-
point.
November 9th?
Yeah,
Correct,
you guys need
yeah.
to look at your schedules
It's-
that you got for November, December, because the dates changed because of the holidays.
We flipped for the election because the election is that Tuesday, so we moved the work session to Thursday.
After the regular session.
Correct.
That's interesting.
session will be the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays.
Well, that's a RAFTA board meeting, the 9th.
I'm sorry, it's not, yeah, you're right.
So just check, and Charlotte's got the agendas posted on her wall by her desk.
But just to check, you moved the Tuesday, the 7th meeting to the 9th.
To the 9th.
And that's a
And
RAFTA
then
meeting
the
for Greg and me.
regular meetings are the 1st and the 15th.
So it would be good if we didn't have an exec session that morning so that one of us could be at RAFTA. You might
Well,
make a note of
we
that.
moved it a year ago.
What?
We moved it in January.
Yeah.
We approved the calendar.
Well, just noticing it now, so.
I can do the 12th of October.
I would rather get it done earlier than try and fit it in November, December, if possible.
Okay. Anybody else have issues with the 12th?
October, you might be out, and I'm going with you, so, no, I'm just kidding.
And you wouldn't be able to Zoom in?
Will you be
I-
doing the 12th?
I will say, as long as we have a quorum, this board
I'm
actually
not-
approves.
Right now, as of right now, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Unless I'm on a plane to Scotland, which could happen in an hour or two. but-
This board is in a little bit different profile because this board actually appropriates the EOTC funds, so you will see it in your budget. It is, under the IGA as with the approval of the other entities. So it's important that they have quorums. If you don't have all members here but have a quorum, you can convene the EOTC meeting, move the budget forward for your consideration, then this whole board will see it as part of the budget adoption. The other entities don't see it because it's actually not their county
But
revenues.
the city of Aspen, when they had a quorum, could approve the budget and get it back to us at a later date. We've done that before.
Correct.
And what did you all say about the 5th of October? Works for me.
Yeah, the 5th or the 12th
Yeah.
5th?
5th or the 12th?
Gone.
works for me too.
You're gone on the 5th also?
I
Well-
will say the second Wild and Scenic Community Summit is going to be scheduled for October 26th, which is when this meeting would have
Yeah,
been.
and I have EOTC, I have Northwest COG that
well,
day.
stumped
So
you.
it is helpful to move,
Yeah, to move it.
December.
Let's move it.
yeah.
Did you propose December? Did it, or,
I didn't look that far forward.
okay, I was wondering if you'd proposed it.
No,
okay.
but,
It's not a problem for you if we did.
oh no, I'm
You can do it.
available
You can do
anytime.
it.
Well, we're gonna be through budget in December. We need to have some discussion about the EOTC budget before December,
Do we?
my feeling.
Correct. We will bring that as part of our budget presentations. It comes in with Public Works.
Right, yeah, but I'm saying is if we don't have an EOTC meeting to get approval of the budget in any way, shape, or form until December,
Oh, I see.
it could be too late. And if Greg's gonna be gone for 2 weeks in October, he may have to miss that meeting. We'll bring him up to speed when we get to the
And
budget.
I'm sorry I don't have the exact dates yet. I will shortly, and by the end of the week.
But Greg, you'll get a chance to ask questions and
Right.
see the EOTC budget because it
Right.
comes to this
Yeah.
board for
I
approval.
would definitely prefer early October to December.
Yes.
Just, just seems like we didn't have a summer.
We
That's
canceled
a
out-
long
yeah.
time. That's like 6
is.
months from when we last met.
And there's always lots to talk about.
Yeah, I'd rather not have
So
it
do you
on
want
the
to check those out
26th.
with the city and see if we can make
The
those
5th.
dates?
And Commissioner Poshman, you might be able to make it on the 5th?
Of October? No, I'm out.
He's
I'm
gone.
Gone,
No.
gone, gone.
Bummer.
Did you get 4 of
what?
us?
It doesn't break my heart if I miss that meeting.
It'll break my heart.
I missed a few
We'll get
during all the
together.
wolf meetings
You
and
can
I
bring me up to
survived.
speed.
Okay. So you want me to check on October 5th or 12th?
Please.
See if we can do it
Either
in
one.
early October. I'm not
See what
comfortable
works for
doing
the
it in
others.
December. I think December is too late.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks. Sorry to be a bother.
Oh, no. 15 people is hard to get
It's like herding cats.
They only had one other future agenda item, and it's not so much for the board, but you should have received an email back on August 17th with an invitation to the Emma Caucus.
I'm going.
That board members were invited to attend the annual
What
meeting.
is it, Francie? I got an email.
It's on September 30th at 2 p.m.
Do we know where?
At the same
Yeah.
place as last year, the Wagner, the end of Wagner,
The ship
the
some.
very end of Wagner Road. It's an absolutely fantastic setting.
On
And,
September, what did you say, Joan?
30th at 2, from 2 to 4.
and so if you could let Charlotte know,
Why don't
that-
we just notice it?
just notice it. Okay. We'll do that. And that's,
Planning on going.
Me too.
that
It's a
is,
potluck, so make your favorite dish.
That's National Public Lands Day.
I think the 3 of us were there last year, right?
and that's all I have until open discussion.
Okay, except what was the final decision on the mini retreat?
The 19th.
September 19th.
And we're gonna do all the
At,
budget
like,
that day and get it
at,
over with.
Like all morning, starting at,
9 o'clock. Was,
Yeah.
Well, then we have
sorry,
then we have a joint meeting with the city that night, so we're gonna be going from 9 to 7? Yeah.
We'll see what we can do to push it back. I know we're pretty packed in that day.
The joint meeting is with Aspen that night?
Yeah.
That is not on here. The 19th.
It's on your
my
future
calendar.
agendas.
At what time?
It's probably from 4 to 6. I
Why
don't
isn't it
know.
on my calendar?
It's on your future agendas from today.
I would also just note that for tomorrow, we're continuing the last land use item, right? Just for people's,
And tomorrow at 5 o'clock is the Democratic Party dinner at 287. Yes, I don't know who's going. You're not going. I'm going. You're
I'm going. There's also the Green Electronic Showcase that CORE is putting on at Taka.
That's what I'm going to that
That's where we'll be, yeah.
Tomorrow?
tomorrow
And
evening.
there's
at
also an
Tacoma.
art opening at the chapel, the landscape.
Yeah,
Were you
maybe.
going to the Democratic
No,
dinner?
I'm not going to the,
You know, you don't have to be a Democrat to go to the dinner, Steve.
what time is,
That's right.
no, I'm unaffiliated, so.
Yeah, you changed your party, but you can still go to the dinner.
TACA is, starts at 5, I think. Let me get there. 5, starts at 5. And it's a different format. There are going to be tables from all kinds of different people, including Holy Cross. And they have some things to give away, like induction
Food?
stove stops. Definitely food. Definitely food. So you guys are going to the Democratic dinner, all three of you?
Steve's not going, Kelly's not going, I'm going.
I don't want to raise their hopes by me showing up.
There's a lot of
something come up.
Democrat?
there are unaffiliated people and independents
I
who come to the dinner.
realize that, but I don't want to raise their hopes.
As the savior of the party? What do you mean?
I'm not quite sure what he's talking
I don't
about.
know what he's
Then
talking
getting
about
back into the
either.
fold.
I don't think they're hoping that at all. I just think they were hoping that you would come to have dinner with them.
Oh, I think there's other things going on besides having dinner when you're talking about Howie and Betty. Definitely.
Okay, what's next?
That's all I had on future agendas anyway. Are you ready to move on to open discussion?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that you remember to put Philip's discussion on an upcoming agenda before January, please.
Yes, we're getting our geotechnical stuff finalized.
Okay.
And it's going to be important for you to understand before we finalize anything.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a request for the Mountain 2030 Climate Solutions Summit. Michael's here to talk about that a little bit. I think this is something that has come in front of the board in the past, and so
Is it a funding request?
it is a funding request. Yes.
A great conference.
Just before we start talking about budget. Okay, hit it.
Thanks. So Michael Port, Climate Action Analyst, here to see if you'd like to sponsor Mountain Towns 2030 for the community level sponsorship, which is $5,000, which comes with 4 registrations. We got a request from the organizers to see if we would be interested in sponsoring. The CAST meeting is taking place the following day, so it's kind of in conjunction with CAST. If you're not familiar with that, with Mountain Towns 2030, it's sort of a summit related to all the stakeholders of climate work in Colorado and surrounding states.
But I'm already registered, so would we
Yeah.
get my $436 back if we did
Yes.
that?
It was
Okay.
$430 to register for that conference?
This year, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was
so-
gonna go. I'm not going for that much money.
Yeah, so I had heard that we had some registrations already. I think GR is signing up to present the microgrid
Yeah, that's
project
great.
as well. I would plan to attend also. So yeah, they let us know that if we did sponsor, any registrations that were already paid could be refunded or rolled into that sponsorship.
Okay, cool.
Well, I'll go if they'll include my registration.
What's the date of
It
that
is
again?
October 18th and 19th.
Oh,
in
We're
Vail.
doing something on October 19th?
It's the same as CAST, so CAST is like,
September 19th.
yeah, so it's like Mountain Summit is Wednesday and Thursday and rolls into CAST, and then CAST has a short meeting, and then there's the Mountain 2030 evening event, and then the next day is CAST again. And they're all at the same place.
So, yeah, I'm out of town.
So you go to Vail for
I
a
would like
week?
to go, but I'm out of town then.
What we're being asked for us to sponsor.
Where
So
would this money come from?
I vote to sponsor it.
the ask is for sponsorship. Typically, the sponsorships, when the board sponsors something like this, it either come out of your contingency funds, or you direct them out to come out of strategic initiative funds out of my budget. I thought that we had sponsored this last year, but we're not seeing the W-9 for it.
I don't think we did.
Yeah.
I think when you and I went, we were a sponsor.
You do?
I think Pickett County's
I
logo
thought we
was up
had
there.
sponsored it, but we're not seeing the record of it, to be honest with you, so.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say, when Francie and I went, it was an interesting conference. They were so far behind the curve. They were bragging about starting composting programs and changing LED light bulbs and having a recycling bin at the local park. We were like, what
And
the
Auden
heck?
wasn't even there.
Yeah, and Pickett County should have been presenting that whole conference and where we've been and what we're doing.
Tessa presented on building IQ.
Yeah.
She did a good job.
Yeah, so I haven't totally ruled out going this year, but I don't have a problem sponsoring it for $5,000, but that'd take up the rest of our discretionary fund.
Well, GR doesn't have to pay if he's presenting, does he?
He does. You don't get a registration.
So that's almost
$430
$1,500 just for the three of us right there.
I think it's important that we have a presence there, and it's also important that we present there, because as you guys have noticed, we're out in front in many ways, but there's also valuable information to be gleaned and relationships to be built.
So are you gonna go?
So I may go, but I would say let's plan on sponsoring it, and then we'll figure it out from there. But I think we should. It sounds like we already have a presence, but I would, if we didn't, I would say I would like to sponsor it, but we want to be able to present on what's happening over here. But it sounds like that's already in the works.
Yes.
So
Which is great.
I'm all for it.
So you'll be back here, because you're gonna be gone the first 2 weeks?
I have not been told by my travel director what my schedule is yet.
And I'm not gonna go ask who that is, because I have a feeling I know.
It starts the 18th, so that's,
Right.
Yeah, I haven't ruled it in or out yet, I'm in now.
I think we are in favor of
But we
supporting
could
it,
send
sounds like.
people, and we could send
Out
Mike,
of-
others.
Do we have anything left
Who
in our
could get something out of
contingency
it?
fund?
In your discretionary,
Yeah, that
yeah.
in your fund, or your fund.
Can we split it?
Can we
Since
what?
we're covering staff costs and
Yeah,
covering our
absolutely, yeah, that's,
representation.
250,
What did you ask? Can we
2,500 out of
Can we
ours?
split it?
I think what Kelly's asking, because we have the strategic initiatives fund and then that discretionary funding for the board, and you're suggesting split it.
Unless
So we
your,
had spent our whole discretionary fund.
unless your fund can absorb it all.
It can absorb it all.
He was saving some.
I like to keep discretionary funds because we never know, especially in light of
Sounds
what's
like we
happening
can
in the
Well,
world.
you're just spending one discretionary fund at the expense of another, Patty.
I know, but I have more authority over one than the other.
I want to increase our discretionary fund to 100,000 next year.
Yeah.
I agree with
Well,
you.
I
Out
do
of the-
think we
out
are
of the- out
gonna,
of the general
we are gonna recommend a little bit of an increase in it next year, but that'll be discussed. But it sounds like the board is supportive of doing the sponsorship.
Figure it out.
Yeah, we won't,
Well, are they going to put our logo on things, because it's kind of late?
Yes, it would be on like the stage and also collateral around
was on
the
the-
event.
Banner last year.
Okay.
so we must have sponsored if it was on the banner last year. I don't know why we don't
just
have a
didn't have a
W-9
president, it was
for
just
it.
Francie and I. That's when Skippy presented his,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thanks, Michael.
Boy, that was like pulling teeth. It's like herding cats, actually.
This is
We
And
must have
then
something else, because.
the-
end of day fun, I can feel.
The other thing,
Michael's like,
yeah, Kara, come on up.
I have
Could
one
ask for more.
major.
So
the brain damage.
in front of you, you should have the letter of support from the Snowcap Caucus on their application for to be a dark skies community, and it's really a letter of support at this point.
Correct. And so following up from your discussion last week, I followed up with ComDev and Snow and Mary, I'm sorry, I'm not getting her name at the top of my head. So as the jurisdiction that regulates lighting, they need a letter of support from Pitkin County to even be able to submit their intention to be a dark sky association. So this is the letter of support. And then I know there is a question about how that operates within our own lighting code, and I did share with you all that, and checking with ComDev, that they are moving forward. They plan to actually come back to the board in November as kind of what their process is for updating the lighting code. Lighting code is not necessarily the same as a dark sky community because there's other obligations of it, but the lighting code would obviously meet one element of the dark sky community requirements.
Well, do we have to wait till November then to sign
No.
this letter?
No,
Okay,
no.
good.
Just there's questions about what was happening with the lighting code and ComDev, so that's the other update.
But our code would still take priority over the whole county. And if they wanted to do something more with their lighting code, what happens then under the dark sky initiative?
So I don't think they're looking to do something more with their lighting code. So there's pieces of the master plan which I'm not up to, but basically, the requirements of the dark sky community are like educational awareness, advocacy, and I think that's really what they're looking to do, and that the lighting code and regulations still falls within Pitkin County's jurisdiction.
A lot of it is educational, and for instance, the annual caucus picnic is September 8th, and one of our members has a really good telescope and is totally into looking at astronomical planets, galaxies, whatever. So that evening, she's going to have her telescope set up, and it's just an educational piece for getting people tuned into being able to see the stars and what's up in the sky.
I don't want any lights on at
And
the
Ann
picnic.
Driggers is kind of plugged into the whole thing too, in terms of our caucus for,
She's amazing.
having some of her photographs there and maybe coming sometime and
Yeah.
teaching people about photography at night, kind of a thing.
Did we get an invitation to their picnic?
No?
Emma invites us.
I actually won't be there because I'm going to be down at Club 20, but I can suggest to them that they should invite all the commissioners.
Oh, when they have their
I
annual
feel a
thing.
little overwhelmed with caucus meetings right now myself, having been to the Frying Pan.
I don't get invited to
And
any.
Redstone, and Marble, and now I'm going to Emma. I'm not sure I'd go up there.
It just would be
sorry.
nice to give us the option and opportunity to know when they are if we wanted to attend. I think
Well,
it's-
I have to say that I have a gorgeous night sky where I live. Occasionally a car will go down 133 and I can see that. And then there's one neighbor sort of down at the end of, down on, what's that road? Thomas Road, I think, that has a light. And during the fire season, when Lake Christine was fire, I kept moving that light, and I always thought it was a fire, but that's about the only light I see unless I go outside and look down towards Glenwood.
Is she in Garfield County?
No.
Or is it Pitkin? Because
It's
Pitkin
Pitkin.
County is very strict on what light you can
It's
leave on at
pretty
night.
spectacular. I do not have light pollution where I live, and boy, am I happy about that.
Yeah, and Ann Drickers said that growing up in England, you do not see the
I was just gonna
stars
say, I
hardly
saw
at
that
all.
in Scotland. I had to
Yeah.
like search for them, because you're too far north.
And then you go out here, go camping in the summer, and we have such spectacular stars in our.
We have dark skies.
Well,
We
it's
have dark
partly
sky
because we
here.
also have really dry air, so.
And we're higher elevation also with less,
I would wait at night looking
less
up for
air
the
to
stars.
block.
So it sounds like there's general support
Oh, yeah.
to sign the letter.
Sign the letter.
Yep, I'm thumbs
Yeah,
up.
I thought that was a given.
Well, yeah, we like to hear from you.
I don't know if there's any changes or edits, but there's not, so.
Okay, cool.
The only thing I was wondering if we should mention that in the past, we have upgraded our lighting code, made it more strict, and we are reviewing it again, planning on, possibly making it more strict.
I think we've told them.
And that might be a good thing to add.
I'll check with the person that's leading this and see if that's helpful right now or not, because there's different status too depending on where our code is. So. Right.
I have one issue.
And that's
thank
all
you
I
for
had
that.
for open discussion.
Francie, I have one.
How about commissioners? Any open discussion?
I have one.
Alrighty.
There was a letter submitted by QQ regarding the Shoshone water issues, and it was signed on by QQ. QQ has submitted that to Northwest COG for signature. Alicia Shanks, who's chairman of COG, brought it to my attention because John Stabney just wanted her to sign it and send it on without discussion. So I contacted Laura in the attorney's office and asked if there were issues, and we do have outstanding issues about information that we have been requesting, our concern being the cameo call about water coming from Shoshone now that might not come through Shoshone, and we might get a call on the Roaring Fork to respond to a cameo call. So I'm in the process, and Kelly looked into it and got Tori in touch with Laura. So I'm going to follow up with Laura before the Northwest COG meeting on Thursday to see if Laura's comfortable with because Northwest COG really cannot send out a letter unless there's consensus. And if we still have outstanding concerns, I am not comfortable allowing this letter to move forward.
I'm not sure QQ can send out letters. without
They
consent.
already did.
Right. Which is, 'cause I haven't seen that letter.
Right, and the conversation I had with Tori is that it's been a longstanding policy of QQ. The letter was in alignment with longstanding policy of QQ, and that's why they didn't circulate it for specific approval.
And COG's been changing that, but thank God for Alyssa to bring it to my attention, because it would have gone on and it would have looked like Picken County supported this issue with Shoshone, and we're not at that point, is my understanding. So I just wanted the board to know, I'll follow up with Laura before I bring it to Northwest COG at our meeting on Thursday.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
I want to make sure it's either a go or a no-go. Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know, just bring some stuff up with the board related to, there was an op-ed this weekend, you know, as a board member of APSHA, I always feel like it's helpful to give what the purview of what's going on there, but there was a column this weekend from a woman who's having disagreements with APSHA about requalifying for rental housing. And you know, I just would ask everyone really to just keep in mind that there's always multiple sides of stories, and APSHA's in a profile where we can't always respond publicly to set a record straight or address misconceptions or misidentifications that are presented, because these become like hearing cases and judicial cases that we have to follow proper process to like let things go through the hearing officer and the appeals and sometimes potentially court case process where you know, we're at a bit of a disadvantage on trying to offer the rationale from the agency about decisions related to some of these cases. So I guess I just would say that, you know, it's just sometimes our hands are tied, and these stories and myths get kind of, they build, they snowball, they build attention, they gain traction, and we're at a disadvantage to sort of set some things straight related to that. And even as it's really hard, every time we hear a story of someone whose housing is compromised or who didn't get housing, you know, some of sort of the generic facts related to how APSHA works is that, you know, every rental has to requalify every 2 years. And so, you know, if someone qualified 2 years ago and something has changed in their circumstances, there's no promise that they requalify 2 years later. And, you know, I think we brought to this board for discussion, like as people have been getting more higher wages, you know, APSHA has also raised their
I was gonna ask you.
category thresholds so
That's
that
great.
people aren't getting kicked out of their category for that. And we've retained those, and then we adjust every year. So as those wage increases get reflected, you know, those shifts continue to
That's appropriate.
get solidified. Yeah. And you know, and then normally in a rental situation for APSHA rentals, you have to have a 4-year work history. Some of the private rentals that, you know, either they're there for mitigation or whatever their history is of how that unit was generated, they may have a different situation between that employer and how their, you know, how their mitigation was approved. That may be less than 4 years, but just generally in APSHA, for the APSHA units, you have the priority is for a 4-year work history. And then related to that, you know, people who are bidding on housing in our system, like the average term of someone's work history is 18 years before they're winning a unit.
Jeez.
So it's like quite a lot of work history in the community. So I wanted to, you know, just sort of provide those generic things, and then just also, you know, it's always helpful if people just keep in mind that, you know, we can't always respond to these stories.
And that's respectful to all
You know,
parties.
it is. It's appropriate, and yeah. But thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else?
No, and I'll let the board know. I'll follow up next week probably with the QQ letter, what the status is.
Sounds great. And so, in terms of this letter, will it just be electronic signatures, John, or
Do you need all of us or
the open
Francie,
sky,
or-
dark skies?
I think it can just be you, Francie, on behalf of the
On-
board, unless the
Yeah,
whole
and
board.
Somebody
wants
will do
to
an electronic
sign.
signature?
We can do that, yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. We're done. We're adjourned.
So we have tomorrow at noontime, right? I can't
Oh,
believe I
yes.
didn't look.
Oh, no, it's at 11 o'clock.